So what you look at that.
3 thumbs up.
3 thumbs up.
4.
4, 5.
Miss Karen, you
Good.
good?
Good go. Good go.
She thumbed up. Like that. Okay, cool.
Everybody ready over here?
You're good.
It is 6:01 p.m. on January 21st, 2025, and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome those who are participating in the Board of Education meeting in person and those watching the meeting via live streaming on YouTube. We would ask that anyone addressing the board to please use the microphone at the podium and to identify themselves for the record. As a reminder, the link to the meeting is on the district webpage under Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. In the event there is a disruption in the streaming, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. We are on item B, Pledge of Allegiance, and we have 2 students, Isley Navarro of Los Angeles Middle School and Ethan Ortiz from Raymond Gabaldon Elementary. Would you join me? Come on up. Mrs. Chavez, would you please read their bios?
It would be my honor. The pledge leader chosen to represent Los Lunas Middle School this evening is Isley Navarro. As an 8th grader at LLMS, Isley played wing under Coach Jorge on the LLHS varsity soccer team. Isley plays flute in the LLMS Symphonic Band under Rena Cedillo and represented LL schools at District Honor Band. Isley is passionate about her studies, consistently going above and beyond to add depth and creativity to her work, collaborating with others to form unique products such as the Gateway to Freedom in Mrs. Simpson's class. Isley serves her school as student council vice president, planning special events and assemblies to motivate her community. Isley enjoys baking, painting, and crocheting, but her favorite passion is helping others. She's investigating career opportunities in criminology or mathematics. Raymond Gabaldon is proud to have Ethan Ortiz lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Ethan is 11 years old and is a 6th grade student at RGE. He lives with his parents, Chris and Elena, and his brother, Noah. When Ethan is not spending time with his family, he enjoys developing his artistic talents. Ethan hopes to be able to attend the same college his mom attended, UNM. He aspires to become an actor when he finishes college. He would like to stay here in this area because Netflix is filming here now, and he sees this as an opportunity. He shared that his favorite teacher was his kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Salas, who made a lasting impression on him. He is also grateful for Mrs. Lupe and Miss Campbell because they are always there for him. Ethan's favorite class is art. He enjoys drawing cartoon characters and incorporating the skills Miss Smith teaches him in class. One of Ethan's most admirable qualities is his unwavering positivity and respectfulness. He is a role model to his peers as well as other students. Even in challenging situations, he maintains a constructive and optimistic outlook that uplifts those around him. We are proud to have Ethan represent Raymond Gabaldon Elementary this evening. We are excited about his future because we know that he will be very successful in all that he does.
Stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to God of the United States of America and its people. Thank you very much. Be seated. Nice job. Now do me a favor and start down there. Hey, there's, yeah, I was gonna say some chocolates.
The important stuff, Bravo way. Ladies first.
Goodies, and you're welcome to take. We're welcome. We're welcome. You did a nice job on a Vegas films, huh? I think this mentions you on, it's kind of like trick or treat in January. No, it isn't. No, please. I can jump on yours. Really? I'll see Mr. Bennett. Thank you very much. That was sweet. They're all mine.
Thank you both again. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for sharing your children with us. And if it is a school night and you want to get home and it's cold, we honestly excuse you. You don't need to sit here and watch us do this, but you are welcome to stay because we're entertaining. To say the least. It's never dull.
Netflix film.
So we'll give him an idea for a feature film.
There you go. Thank you, guys.
We are on item C, the announcement of the meeting. Mrs. Chavez, would you please announce the meeting?
This meeting has been announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Resolution and is a legally constituted meeting of the Los Lunas Schools Board of Education.
Thank you very much. We are on item D, approval of the agenda. Mrs. Chavez, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
I would like to recommend the following changes to the agenda tonight. I would like to move to item E, bullet point 1, student representative. And then immediately following that, move to J, board reorganization, and then resume the order of the agenda.
Which would be item E2, et cetera, then F, et cetera.
Correct.
Okay. I would stand for a motion regarding the approval of the agenda as suggested by Mrs. Chavez.
I move that we approve the agenda as suggested by Ms. Chavez. I would second it.
You guys are quick tonight. Mr. Talley has moved and Mr. Bennett has seconded to approve the agenda as suggested by Mrs. Chavez. Specifically, we will do item E1, then item J, then resume to E2, and then the remainder of the board agenda. Is there any discussion? Having no discussion, I will call for the vote. Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Talley,
Yes.
Mrs. Simoia,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Mrs. Chavez, I will turn this topic over to you. Item E1, Student Representative Report.
Please allow me to introduce this month's student representative from Century High School, Shannon Padilla. She is a daughter of Miss Paula Padilla. Shannon's educational journey began at Isleta Elementary, followed by Los Lunas Middle School, and then Los Lunas High School until she joined Century High School in January 2023. Shannon is now a junior and plans to graduate with the class of 2026. As a true Centurion, Shannon stands out as a leader. She has been leading the work in our service learning class. She was recently featured in the Valencia County News Bulletin and later received a Partner in Education grant for her work in creating CHS's free student store, hygiene pantry, and food bank. She has also started volunteering regularly at the Roadrunner Food Bank with her peers and runs our nutrition on the weekends distributions. She can be found daily at lunch and after school, working the store where as many as 50 students visit a day. She is a driving force in improving outcomes for the CHS school community. After high school, Shannon aspires to enlist in the military, but is unsure of which branch she will choose. Ms. Shannon, the podium is yours.
Of exciting things happening. On January 14th, some of our students visited the Fuse Maker Space. This space in Albuquerque is open to the public and has many types of materials to help people design and produce whatever projects they can imagine. Students learned so much about design and fabrication. On January 21st, students will participate in win card races where they design a car that is powered by wind. This is a student competition that our students really enjoy. On February 11th, we will have a Cool Speak Parent Night as part of our parent engagement activities. This activity will help get our parents involved in their student school. On March 8th, we will have a car show. This is a great community activity that gets our students, staff, and families involved. Last year, our car show was a big hit, and we know this year will be even better. We have Career Week, March 10th through the 14th. During this week, we will have many guests visiting Century High School, talking about a variety of careers that students may be interested in. We also have a prom scheduled for April 11th. This is our only school dance for students, and students are always really excited to take part in it. Finally, we have Senior Sunset scheduled in May for seniors to come together one last time before they graduate.
Thank you very much. We have some questions, I'm sure, for you. Mr.
Yes.
Vickers, would you like to lead?
Sure. I just want to say it's commendable that you volunteer for Roadrunner Food Bank. That's just a wonderful quality, helping other people.
I do, I enjoy it.
And where's the prom gonna be held?
I'm pretty sure it's going to be held at Isleta Casino.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Well, thank you for coming up and being a part of our meeting tonight.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you also, and thank you for starting that school store. That seems like it's a pretty good thing going, and of course, you got acknowledged for that, so it's pretty awesome. As far as the military, you can start taking your ASVABs now, so you can increase your score if you want to select where you want to go and maybe get some scholarships or some training money, but lean towards the Coast Guard. Thank you, though.
Definitely think about that. Mrs. Seymour.
Absolutely. I think it's commendable. I read about the article in Miss Video in the newspaper, and that was phenomenal. I said, I boasted because I was at work reading it. I was like, our district. It was so cool. I'm also in awe of you as far as and inspired by you for joining the military. Do you know what kind of an MO, what you want to do when you're in the military? Because, there are certain things you can't do on the Coast Guard, like heavy duty equipment operator and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Listen to her.
completely unsure of it. I don't really know what my MOS would be as of right now, but yeah, I really don't know yet.
Well, take a look at the Marines and the Army. I'm really
Take
partial.
consideration, those are my two options as of
They're
right now.
great options. I married one. He was both services, so. I'm sorry.
You won't get a good tan like this in the Army.
We told you we weren't gonna behave.
It's really cold. She's so big. Mr. Tally, get us back in line.
No, I also want to commend you for your interest in joining the military. I would recommend the Air Force or Space Force.
I think we have.
No one said.
No,
No one said names.
but wait. I have 3 generations in my family of naval service, including 2 of my sons, both twins. Both were stationed at the same base. They got to see a lot of the world on really big boats. So just a thought, maybe. Air Force, of course, we love men and women in blue. Army green, yeah, but I mean, I'm, you know what I mean.
Wearing
olive. The blue.
She's wearing olive.
We're not cruise ships.
They do serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you about the Cool Speak Parent Night. Can you give me more information about the Cool Speak Parent Night?
Unfortunately, I don't have much information on that right now.
Okay.
That activity.
I'm looking forward to hear about that. That sounds really innovative.
Yes.
Also, I noted in your bio that you are a driving force in improving outcomes for the Century High School community. Can you talk about some of the other outcomes you feel like you're a part of that you are proud of?
The main one that was already mentioned that really holds a place in my heart is me having a take in the students' free store. That one I hold really close to my heart because it's kind of personal when it comes to stuff like that, helping kids that don't really have the confidence to speak up about certain situations that they're in, and I feel like I'm one of those kids. So like I said, that's just one of my main like things that I'm very proud of that I've done so far for the school.
That is terrific. Well, we look forward to shaking your hand in 2026. We're very excited for you. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you so much.
And we know that you have to get home and do whatever it is that you need to do. So again, thank you very much. Be careful out there. Stay nice and warm. I know we have an SRO and another adult that'll be escorting you home. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, thank you very much for coming.
thank you so much for having me.
You bet. We're now on to item J, which is the board reorganization. Okay, I would stand for nominations for the office of board president.
Dr. Osowski?
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Talley.
Before we do that, can I just read the policy? I have it pulled up here.
Sure.
Just to make sure that, one, we're doing it right, because I know last year we didn't quite do it as stated in here. So I just want to read the portion that pertains to what we're doing this evening for reorganization.
Mhm.
The board shall use the following procedure to elect various officers. The floor shall be open to nominations for the office to be voted upon. At this time, the names of possible appointees shall be put forward by the members and debated. When the debate ends, the president shall call the roll of the members, and each member shall cast his vote or her vote. It doesn't say that, but
Thank you.
something we gotta fix.
You think?
The votes shall not be tallied until all members have voted. The nominee who receives the highest number of votes shall be appointed to the office of nomination. The new president of the board shall take office upon election, and the election for vice president shall then take place, and following that, the election of the secretary. And each officer shall take office upon election to that position.
Thank you very much. And I believe that that's what we have.
Okay, I just,
Yeah, but I'm glad that you read that for the community's knowledge. I appreciate that.
That being said, Madam President, I'd like to make a nomination for the president position for yourself, Dr. Osowski.
Madam President, I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you. Mr. Talley or Mr. Bennett has nominated and Mrs. Simoia has seconded the nomination of Dr. Osowski for the office of board president.
so
Are there any?
So
we take nominations. I don't think we have to second the nomination. According to the policy.
but I think Robert's Rules of Order does require that, is a second.
So,
The motion always. Is there? any
So-
other-
Yes, and we're going to ask for another nomination. So this is just the first.
so I don't think we vote on it until after all nominations have been.
It's correct.
Okay,
We're just looking for a second nomination.
Okay.
That's correct. Okay. So, and I would accept the nomination. So are there any other members?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Bennett.
Okay, Mr. Bennett, is there a second? I would second for Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, I need to confirm that you would accept the position if voted for.
Also, I feel very flattered and stuff, but just because of my time constraints, I probably won't be able to hold that position, but I thank you so much for the consideration.
Right. Are there any other nominations for the position of president? Is there any discussion?
Well, Madam President, I would like to say the reason I nominated you, I think, this board sort of has meshed real well in the last 6-7 months, really good. And I think we're heading in the right direction. And I know our focus is on policies, and that's what we really need to be focused on, is cleaning up these policies. And I think, you make us read too much, but I think it's a good thing. And that's the reason I'd like to keep moving forward with what we got, keep the momentum going.
Thank you very much. Is there any other discussion?
Madam President, I'd like to express my second for the nomination for you to continue in that role, because I do feel that with your experience, your drive, your direction, our reading homework, you're getting us on the right track of where we need to be. This is not easy and there is work involved, and I think every one of the board members takes this role seriously. We appreciate your leadership. So with that, I gave my full second.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call for a vote, and Mr. Vickers, who is your vote for, please?
Michelle Osowski.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bennett,
Dr. Osowski.
Mr. Tally,
Dr. Osowski.
Mrs. Simoia.
Dr. Wazowski, please.
I am going to abstain, but the vote is 4-0. Dr. Osowski has been named as board president. I do want to take a moment and say that it has been a high learning curve, very humbling year, and I could not have gone through it with better people. I'm honored to be with you, and we are going to, got to get quite a bit done. It's been an honor to be with you, and it'll be an honor to serve in this position again. Moving on, I would stand for nomination to the office of Board Vice President.
Madam Chair, I would nominate Sonia Simoia for Vice President.
Is there a second?
I would second that.
Is there a second? Is there somebody else that we would like to nominate? Is there another nomination? Is there any discussion? I will call for the vote. Mr. Vickers, who is your vote for, please?
Sonia Simoia.
Mr. Bennett,
Sonia Simoia.
Mr. Tally,
Ms. Simoia.
Mrs. Simoia,
I'll abstain from my vote.
and I vote for Mrs. Simoia for the office of Vice President. Motion passes 4-0. One abstention. I would stand for a nomination for the office of Board Secretary. Apologize.
Dr. Osowski, I'd like to nominate myself to do that position again this year.
Is there a second? I will second that. Are there any further nominations?
Madam President,
Yes,
I'd like to nominate Mr. Bennett for the position of Secretary, Board Secretary.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Is there any discussion?
Madam President, can you give us an idea of the duties of that office specifically?
I can. We've had to learn it kind of the hard way this year because some of those duties, as Mr. Tally and I have learned the hard way, are embedded in policies that are not all together. So one of those that is huge for this district is the monitoring of IPRA requests. IPRA requests for the public to be aware are those, it's Information Public Request Inspection of Public Records Act. So it's when any member of the public would like to inspect any particular record that anybody in this district has created because we are paid for by state and or federal funds, depending on our funding source. So that is probably the biggest responsibility. And as we have discussed in board retreats and as we have listened to many different sessions as we've gone through our different trainings, staying on top of IPRAs, making sure that those are completed timely, being down here to where we can have conversations with the administration is a huge responsibility. The next part of this responsibility, I think Mr. Tally can speak to, but it's also being down here and being available for signatures. So do you want to add anything to that, Mr. Tally? Did I miss anything?
I don't think you missed anything. I was just gonna read the policy of what the secretary does, just because I got it pulled up too. It's actually a lot less wordy and verbose than what we just discussed. That's The secretary shall perform all duties as required by law and perform other duties assigned by the board. The secretary shall be responsible for all records of board meetings and shall assist the superintendent, custodian of public records for the district in providing access to these documents as required by law. I didn't mean that to sound the way it sounded.
It's all right. Talk to you later in the parking.
If I may, my intent in nominating, and although I do believe Mr. Tully is doing an excellent job in the role, my intent on nominating Mr. Bennett was for the exact reason of location and our ability to take advantage of him being retired and his extra hours, his proximity to central office should something need to be signed. I know that it is often that Mr. Talley in his role for his job, it could be difficult to get a hold of him. And I do believe, yeah, it was a lot less verbose than we talked about. But for that reason, if Mr. Bennett wishes to accept the position, because I don't think I was asked if I accepted the position, would accept the nomination. So if Mr. Bennett and Mr. Talley are willing to accept those nominations, I think I'm gonna ask. But back to the reason for the nomination for Mr. Bennett, I also believe that his years of experience in working with the district, his time and longevity on the board, and his experience in working with the administrators in the district positions him well suited for the position of secretary.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? I will call for the vote. And this is by name. Mr. Vickers, who do you vote for, please?
Mr. Bennett,
Thank you very much. Mr. Bennett,
They,
Mrs. Simoia,
I will vote for Mr. Bennett.
thank you very much. Mr. Talley,
I'll abstain.
and my vote will be for Mr. Bennett as well. Motion passes 3-0. The officers of the board, myself as president, vice president, Mrs. Simoia, Mr. Bruce Bennett, secretary. I want to thank each one of you for willingly standing up and doing this particular job. Appointment to the committees. So this is part 2 of item J. One of the duties of the board president is to appoint 2 individuals to serve on the finance committee and on the audit committee. So there would be 2 individuals for each committee. However, last year I asked for interest in those particular committees because it is additional time. And I would like to open the floor now for any persons who would like to ask for consideration to be appointed to let's start with the audit committee. Is there any board member interested in serving on the audit committee?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Vickers.
I've served 2 years on it and I'd be happy to serve my final year on it.
Your final
Say
year.
final. Never say never.
Right.
Goonies never say die.
Yeah,
Madam President, I'd also like to volunteer for that position also if available.
are there any others interested to serve on the audit committee? It is my pleasure to appoint Mr. P. David Vickers as chair and Mr. Bruce Bennett as member for the audit committee. For the finance committee, do I have any persons interested on serving on the finance committee?
Madam President,
Yes, Mrs. Simoia.
having served on the finance committee in previous roles on this board, I would be honored and privileged to serve on the finance committee again. I am also available on the Tuesdays of the scheduled finance committee meetings. So I work from home on those days. So this would be easy for me to get to district office.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other persons interested in serving on the finance committee? I will be happy to serve on the finance committee as well. So it is my pleasure to appoint Mrs. Simoia and myself to the finance committee. Mrs. Simoia, would you please act as chair?
I'd be honored.
Thank you very much. We have moved through item J. Let's go back to item E2. Back to you, Mrs. Chavez, for the budget finance report.
And I would like to have Ms. Tracek stand at the podium to provide the budget and finance report. Thank you, Mrs. Tracyk.
Madam President, members of the board, Acting Superintendent Chavez. So the first list of stated finances I have are the expenses. If you could get to the top of that list. So this is the same form that I do use each month that we go over this. However, the last two columns, I added two more columns, kind of comparing where we were last month. The second to the last is the percentage remaining last month. And the final column is where we were at percentage last year. For the last year, all I did was fill out the operational, because it would be, the other funds don't always kind of go by month, always the same each year. And it would be actually a lot of work to do to get that. So when I have been, at one point, I'll start getting these, at the point where I've done this a whole year, so I'll be able to pull that percentage later in the future. But there's, as you can see, not much difference in the operational from the last month to this month. The month does round. It did change, but it's not a big enough to swing the percentage. And you can see, last year we were at 24, and the month that you don't see even prior to that was just 26. So it's a slow moving, because most of the expenses are encumbered already, which already fall into the spent or encumbered column. So it just moves mostly out of encumbered into spent as time goes by. So all of the funds that we have are in there. So if you scroll down to the bottom, it tallies it all up. And we go from the grand total at 32% remaining. And last month it was at 34% listed. The next section down, I have the operational revenue. And it shows we are at 42% at this point, and the prior month we were at 50. And it really makes sense when you think about it, because this is as of January. And so you're looking at 5 months left into the year. So if you take 5 divided by the 12 months, you're at the 42%. So we are on target. However, if you go into the next tab on this, you can see the detail of the operational. The first one is the property taxes, and the property taxes don't come in like the SCG comes in the same amount each month. There are spikes when property taxes are paid. So the next month we should probably see another spike, and then there will be a spike in June. So it's actually still on target for where we should be. The next one was under budgeted. The PED was real strict on what we could budget for interest. And can't even see. The next one is on the tower fee revenue. That again is at 42%, because that's another one where we are getting the same amount monthly. And so that's where we are in time, what's been as of January. The SCG, if you total it out and we receive the rest of the 5 months, that remaining amount will be received. The only reason that might change is if what we budgeted and our children the students that we budgeted for, if there was a large swing in that, but since we had our 40th day, it looks like we're on target, if not. And then the last one then is indirect costs. And indirect costs, the first quarter and the second quarter have been posted. So, as you can see, the remaining amount was less than what we've already received. So that will depend too on how much is spent in the federal funds and all that. So that can fluctuate, but that is also what I believe to be online, what to expect if not under budgeted. So I feel confident in the numbers that we have, that we will not be any surprises of expensing too much or having budgeted too much in revenue or anything like that. So I think we are comfortable and safe in the numbers that we have.
Thank you.
And I do not have anything for audit this one, so I just have we didn't have an audit committee this time until our audit is finalized. Do you have any questions on the finance budgeting side of it?
Mr. Vickers, any questions?
Yes, I have a couple. On the revenue sheet, what is power fees?
The
Tower
tariff,
fee.
oh, that is like the Verizon, will lease out one of our towers, so we get a monthly, we have an agreement with we have T-Mobile and Verizon, where we receive revenue and that goes into some of it goes into our
Okay.
operational revenue.
Do we get more when they raise rates? And the indirect cost, can you define that exactly? What's indirect? cost?
Indirect costs are costs that some of our funds, some of our federal funds, some of the state grants that we receive allow us to charge a portion, a percentage of indirect costs. So for example, I do a lot of work for the federal funds. There's a lot of all the checks that go through, all the bars that we do, a lot of things that I do, but I can't charge any of my time directly to the fund. Now, if say the grant, a federal fund, like, let's say it's like Title I, they might have a coach that they pay for, that we can actually code their cost. So that's a direct cost to the federal fund, where our accounts payable, everything, all the bills that they process are all paid out of operational, but we're able to charge a little bit of our costs for all the things that we do that can't be directly coded to the federal fund. Not all funds are, that's allowed, but some of the bigger funds, we do have. So that will fluctuate according to funds that we might receive and how much the federal fund is that year. And that
So,
makes sense, so.
yeah, then the last is the two items in red on the budget. Can you explain that?
I'm sorry, the two what?
The items in red.
Oh, in red. On the budget, those are ones that would be in the negative. So the amount that we have for example, the first one is in transportation. And we are going to be given a certain amount. We know how much we're going to be receiving each year for transportation. However, our costs way exceed every year the amount that we're allowed in transportation. So I know that every year in operational, I will have to budget to pick up the negative in transportation. However, we keep it coded, and so that's not done until June, until all expenses are in there. So that way I know every year how much transportation is truly costing me. So those will be in there, but by the end of the year, those expenses will be moved out of transportation to zero then. That is the same for also the child CYFD. We're gonna have the same amount of teachers, but we're never sure how many CYFDs are gonna be in a program that we have for like our grads type of what we have. So there are some children that are looked over, and if there's CYFD, we get revenue for it. if we don't, but we're still gonna be providing that service whether we do or not. So operational always picks that up at the end of the year also.
And we know that.
We know
But
that.
this
so-
is just for tracking, and also we know that transportation's horribly underfunded by the legislature. So this is just for us to have real costs, so we can have real conversations if they ever really want to have a conversation.
Right, because I could go back and look exactly every year how much money I've had to move in from transportation to operational. So I could tell you every year and it's something that I do look at the trend, because I'll have to look at how much I'll have to put next year. How much of that is in salaries, and is there gonna be raises, and so all of that will have to be calculated.
And the childcare block grant, if I am recalling correctly, you've said that that kind of comes in at wacky times. We can't really count on when that grant comes in. Is that we front load it, in other words, we carry it.
We front load it, and then it just depends on how many students, but then they have to do those reporting. So if the reporting hasn't been completed, we're not finalized, so say that does get finalized, then I'll be receiving that. But it's possible, you don't always have CYFD kids. There's typically always a CYFD child or two in there, but not the majority of time. I don't remember a year that we haven't had to supplement that one. But it's
It is what it
worthwhile
is,
fun.
right? We
Is
know it, but we appreciate it.
Is it mostly salaries?
Mhm,
And that
yes.
is that's what we need to budget for, and there's no way $9,000.
Right, because if you even look, you'll see there's
Yeah.
no change whatsoever from one month to the next.
Yeah.
So that means, now there would have been change where the encumbrances were reduced and the spent went up, but it's still the same amount, so it's just contracted. Now they might have some expenses here and there, little amounts that'll go through, but nothing changed, so that's why it didn't change, because all the expenses that are on there were something that they might have bought something, but the rest of it's contracted salaries.
And
Mr. Bennett, or I'm sorry, Mr. Vickers?
just follow up on that, the child care block grant is a pass-through from federal funds. Is that true? Or
That is a federal, yes. So I'm not sure on the pass-through on it, it's,
but the origin of the money is the federal government. Is that correct? Yeah.
yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bennett, any questions?
No questions.
Mrs. Simoia?
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Mr. Tally, questions?
Yep.
Good to go. I think all of mine have been asked, or all of my questions have been answered. The indirect costs again, we include that also with any grant, not just the federal grants, but if we applied for a separate grant, we also include in the total cost for the grant that we request indirect costs at a certain percentage, correct?
So, yeah, so we are told at the beginning, so when we're even at the time we're budgeting, we're told what that percentage is. So the PED calculates how much the percentage we can, there's just like idea B, Title III is a different percentage. You can only do 2%. That one stays, but all the other ones fluctuate. But there are funds that do not allow it at all. And they're also, the majority you're gonna see is federal grants. However, there are some state ones that they'll allow it. And usually what comes in is when the grant application is given to us, it'll have a place where it'll tell you, that you can put it in there. It'll have a line that you'll put it in there. Or it will specifically sometimes spell out that indirect costs are not allowed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate the report.
You're welcome.
Item E3, construction update.
We would like to invite Mrs. McMinn to the podium to provide her construction update for the month.
Madam President, members of the board, Acting Superintendent Chavez, thank you for having us. Unfortunately, I don't have a No, I don't have a PowerPoint for you. This week it was an extremely busy and full week last week, but I do want to give you an update on some of the things we have going on throughout the district. So the West Side Transportation Center, we have a project going on to install a canopy for our athletic or activity buses. The asphalt has all been completed. The electrical improvements that were needed for the buses has been completed. And we have the main post and structure for that canopy started. Now that the asphalt's done, we can continue work on the actual covering of that canopy. Another project that started this week was the last of our pre-K canopies. The last one that is going up is at KGE. So we'll continue to see that project progress over the next 2 weeks. Los Lunas High School Stadium. This project has the project that keeps on giving, but over the Christmas break, with the help of Ms. Romero and our purchasing department, we were able to get a gas meter and a gas line relocated. So that way we continue on with that project. So there were many hands involved over Christmas break to make sure we got that done. So far, we think we're out of the woods in this area of all the underground utilities that needed to be relocated. We also had seen one, the last one was an old water valve that was discovered underneath the ground that we've been able to relocate that valve, replace it, put it in an area that's serviceable and maintainable for the future. So now that we have all that, we'll start seeing the progression of the actual building go up there at the concession stand. We will be working this week on updating the overall schedule now that we're through all these utility relocates, and hopefully we'll be able to present that to the superintendent's office and get you a more clear timeline of that project. We also continue the progress of Peralta Elementary. We've been working with our purchasing office on looking at furniture for the new school, as well as Lorraine Goudelet has been helping with identifying some of the old furniture and where we can utilize that in the district. And get some more use out of it. So those are some things we've been doing. And then you guys will also be able to see firsthand this Friday during your site visit. So we're ready for you. Be sending an email to the superintendent's office, just giving you some more clarification as far as parking, entrance, dress attire. So you can be prepared for that visit. We'll be coming. Over Christmas break, we also seen some improvements at Bosque Farms Elementary. We beefed up the interior fencing of that site, adding locks to all the gates. We added gates that were never there to begin with. So they have an interior perimeter. Second, we're working on moving forward, hopefully with the exterior fencing improvements, but we did see the interior done during Christmas break. We also were able to complete flooring improvements in the classrooms that received the enormous amount of overflowed water, received new carpet. The hallway also received new LVT tile in that building. And then another project that's been working on behind the scenes also with Lorraine is some removal of our portables. Part of our facility master plan is to demolish the old portables at the Blue School campus that are pretty much inhabitable or cost more to renovate for us to get up to use. And so instead of paying to demo those, Lorraine has been very successful in auctioning some of those portables off. So it comes at no cost to the district. It is whoever wins on that auction is responsible for the cost in removing those off our campus. And so we're really grateful that we've been able to save money there, yet clear away some space to make it usable land. We've also had our maintenance staff being able to clear the area of old debris, old concrete, and that we can repurpose that land for the district rather than just have it be an animal site or continue to deteriorate. Another item we've been looking at for the future is planning improvements for our playgrounds. And so I know this has been a topic in the district is ADA and accessibility equipment in our playgrounds. We do want to let you know that all of our playgrounds do have accessibility features within the playgrounds that are on site. Unfortunately, they're not very focused on when you have a very large piece of equipment, but all manufacturers of playgrounds have to provide some form of ADA or accessibility on the lower parts of your playgrounds. What you tend to see, we'll see tic-tac-toe blocks on there. You'll see different sound drums. There's even a communication horn where one student can talk to, and then it comes out the other side. Those are all ADA and accessibility features that do come on playgrounds. However, we understand there may be a need and a growing need for adding additional equipment. So we've been able to visit multiple sites so far, and we're working with a vendor on identifying what's suitable per site. And so based off of availability in size that's open space. And what needs each school has, we're looking at adding additional equipment to those sites. And then lastly, I wanted to update a new, which I'm really excited about, our department was able to roll out this year, is a scholarship opportunity for our seniors. So we have a recycling initiative that our maintenance guys take part of. Anytime there's metal, we have a big scrap metal pile, and then we recycle that throughout the year. We're able to use those funds for various things like the upcoming Matanza. We use it to sponsor teams for the golf tournament that go back into the district. And one avenue that we want to highlight this year is giving that back to our seniors. So we created a scholarship program, and the reason we want to present it today, just to get the word out there. It is posted on our website under events and news, and also has been distributed to our high schools through Miss Ole. So we're really excited to get feedback for our students. There's 3 different opportunities for them to respond. One of those is we wanted them to describe something in their facilities that has impacted their education in a positive way. Another option is maybe there's a facility improvement that could have impacted their education in a positive way. So we want to look at both avenues. Where is an area that we're doing really good at? And maybe there's an area that we can improve. And then the last opportunity is for our graphically inclined students to create a logo for our department that encompasses teamwork between the custodial, warehouse, maintenance, and construction department. So it kind of broadens all spectrums. We're really looking forward to hearing the input of our students. A lot of times they're the ones that are using our facilities firsthand, and we don't hear from. We hear from staff all the time, but not necessarily our students. So we're really excited for this opportunity for them, so they can go to our to the district website under events, news and events, and it'll be there for them. So with that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bickers.
I have a question about the fencing at Lusky Farms. I know they have different requirements than the other sites. What is the difference between the outer and the inner fence, and how are we restricted regarding a fence?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're doing is similar to Sundance Elementary. In the interior of our building, we're allowed to use chain link fencing. So that's what that inner perimeter kind of between buildings, since Bosque Farms is a school that has multiple buildings on the site. You'll have fencing in between all those, so that way students can no longer really access the parking lot through the field. Before it used to be open, now there's a gate there. So we've kind of beefed up the interior as far as the chain link fencing. The exterior fencing, what we're looking at improving on is removing the Esperanza chain link fence that is a 3-foot fence, and adding a 6-foot. But in order to accommodate the village, we are doing a wrought iron fencing that is similar to what we did at Sundance. So it is that what we call decorative fencing on the exterior, but it will be we're looking at doing a 6-foot fence along there to remove the chain link.
Oh, yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett.
No, I have no question. You ready for the Matanza this weekend?
We will see.
Mrs. Simoia.
Yes, Ms. McMinn, thank you for talking about the ADA playground equipment. That was one of the things that I had noticed, and in some of the seminars and conferences that we attend, they talk about the different equipment. Have you been able to see what other elementary schools are using in local districts around us?
Yes, as a matter of fact, today, this is a topic that came up. I recently joined the NMPFMA, which is the New Mexico Public Facilities Managers Association. So I'm the new regional representative for our area, and that's been one of the topics that they've been looking at. And so part of this association has been great because we've been able to reach out amongst each other in the school district to see what other states, what other counties and other school districts are doing, and what they're finding is successful and what they're not. And today that was one of the topics that they have brought up is playground equipment for that. Another thing that we had success with here in our district is a couple of years ago, we did a playground improvements, and we created committees with 6th graders at 2 of the sites, and they were able to give input. And believe it or not, one of their biggest advocates was for accessibility and mobility equipment for students in wheelchairs and things like that. So it is something that we're, getting input from students. We're also working with other schools around the district and helping each other out to identify those pieces.
Excellent, and congratulations then to your appointment to yet another responsibility. We appreciate you.
Mr. Talley.
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
So a couple of things. I know that Mr. Talley listed at the last board meeting that one of the things he was very interested in knowing a little bit more about was some of the ADA compliant playground equipment. And I think in finance, you talked to us about the different examples that we have throughout the district of ADA compliant playground equipment. But it still sounds like we can do better. And I know you talked about that and you talked specifically about looking at some different equipment. And I had suggested that we have a full proposal because we do have a nice cash balance. We've been saving for a rainy day. And it is an important topic. So this board could be considering making sure each one of our playgrounds has a good assortment and something to be thinking about. So to honor Mr. Talley's request and then also your interest, I look forward to seeing that soon in terms of the ADA. I am really excited about this scholarship program.
So
And the medals, like, could my husband, for instance, donate plethora that he has at our house? Because we'd like to.
we have a wonderful gentleman on our staff that is very diverse in metal recycling, and he gets us the most out of the metal, and he knows exactly what to separate and how to present it. And so we're very excited to be able
So that's a
to do
yes.
this. Yeah, we'll pick it up and we'll
That's-
take it and put it.
So
towards
Mrs. Zowski will say, let you know when her husband's not home.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is, yeah.
If you want to donate that metal, we'll definitely recycle it and add it to the fund.
Well, it's an important, I think it sounds, I really like that. So how did you guys come up with that topic?
It's been something we've been toying around with for the past year and just looking at different avenues of incorporating our students and also how can we use this funding to give back? Because all this recycling comes from old table legs, old file cabinets that are broken. You know, we just try to look at everywhere we can salvage those things. The HVAC units that we replace, we take those to the recycling. Anything like that. So it's just another way that we can give back. And also what I'm really looking forward to is hearing from our students. And it's a way to give, that these students can leave something back as they're ending their time with us. What would have made an impact or what did? What are positive things that we can incorporate maybe at other school sites that one school site might not have? Just kind of seeing what we get back. So I'm hoping that we get a lot of interest in it.
That is awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. Mrs. Chavez.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Pinkman, and thank you, Mrs. Tracek. I would also like to thank all of our employees who prepared our schools and facilities for the frigid cold weather this week. You know me very well, I'm not a fan of this weather, and I will be very happy when it's 95+ degrees. So we'll just move forward with that and pray for an early spring. There are many factors that are considered when we decide to alter the daily schedule, and the decision is always made in the best interest of our students and staff. We needed the additional time today to ensure student and staff safety, as well as ensure students were transported safely to school. Thank you to everyone for adjusting to the delayed schedule today. And thank you, Isley, for your thank you that we had a delayed schedule. So thank you. I would also like to thank our staff who organized and held a successful Staff Professional Development Day on January 7th. The day was organized in a conference-style manner. Staff had a variety of sessions to choose from, and it was our last scheduled professional development day of the school year. Hard to believe, but that was our last one. Winter sports are in the middle of their season. Our student athletes continue to compete with class. Thank you to our Jaguars and our Tigers for representing our district with good sportsmanship. Parent-teacher conferences are about 2 weeks away. Monday, February 3rd is designated as Parent-Teacher Conference Day, so I am positive that parents will be receiving information very soon regarding their scheduled parent-teacher conference appointments. And finally, our district website continues to evolve and grow. School sites and departments are updating their websites routinely, as well as our school board page. It has been updated and has a nice upgrade, so we're very excited about that. We encourage our community to regularly visit our website for more information on our district. And with that, I conclude my report for the evening.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. We are on to item F, board commendations. Mr. Vickers.
The only one that comes to mind is that our superintendent is leading by example as far as physical fitness. She ran a half marathon on Sunday in Phoenix and did pretty darn well. So some commendation for that.
Thank you.
You ran the whole way?
Majority.
Really? Because I get that many steps in over like 2 weeks. So I just didn't know if it had to be like a continuous thing. For that. My goodness. Thank you. Mr. Bennett, do you have any commentations? Mr.
Yes,
Bennett?
I just want to let everybody know the Matanzas this weekend. Saturday, so please get out there, buy a ticket, come and eat all you can. I know Tiffany mentioned it, the maintenance and a lot of us other people from the district will be there, you know, providing what we can for it, but the money raised goes to scholarships for Valencia County students, so please come out there.
Appreciate that. Mrs. Simoia?
Absolutely. A couple of shout outs. Again, I'd like to express my appreciation for the bus drivers, the bus maintenance people, the SROs, the site administrators who had to be out there in brutally cold. I believe in certain parts of the valley where I live, at least, it was 3 degrees. I was fortunate to have the hubby start the car in the morning, and so were our students fortunate to have a 2-hour delay and those buses nice and warm. So appreciate the work that you guys put into that. I'd also like to recognize the maintenance department for setting up and establishing that scholarship. That is incredible. What an incredible and generous and thoughtful, rather than it going to the dumps, they're recycling what they can and then putting to good use that metal. I love the idea of that they have to actually write an essay as to why and what impact that made. And then finally, no pressure maintenance department, but yeah, we like to see like trophies come back so we can, you know, accommodate. And I will be there eating my weight in chicharrones. Do not go at 10 o'clock and expect to have chicharrones. If you want chicharrones, you better be there by 8 a.m. Just like, correct? Go quick. Okay, I just want you to know.
Mr. Tolley?
I just echo Mr. Vickers' sentiment for the good job.
Thank you.
Marathon? Yeah, it's be a long time before I.
We're busy. We're busy, right?
Yeah, that's a good excuse.
No?
Yeah. we're busy. Okay, so again, I really want to thank the, I believe, Mr. Garcia, Desi, and Mr. Garcia, Mark, are out on the roads pretty early on these nasty days. So I did think about you at 3 a.m., not in the way that that just sounded. And then, sorry, Karen, sorry about these minutes. It's just gonna panic tomorrow. I was worried about you. I want to put it that way. So now I'm flustered. Anyway, that you guys get out there and drive those roads and make sure that things are safe for our students.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that puts my foot in.
It's a thing sitting next to you. Yes. Okay. Mr. Bennett, also, I want to commend him. How many years is this doing the Matanza?
Probably been close to 18, something like that. It started, I've missed maybe 4.
Okay, and Mrs. Tracek, how many for you? I understand you're kind of like the crew chief, kind of bossy.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Well, for the staff that go out there and do that, it's, you guys are up early. It's giving up a full day of your weekend, and I'm sure that you're tired. And then coming off of a week where we've kind of had some weather stuff and a board meeting and whatnot. So I want to thank everybody from our district who goes out to the Matanza. I know our students appreciate the funds. We hear a lot of great comments about it. I am looking forward to our particular version of Bizcochitos winning. So I want to talk about that, or just give a commendation for that one. I also want to thank our bus drivers and definitely all the staff who got there early as required, but they could have called in sick. They could have said a lot of things, but I heard lots of great feedback about staff were at sites and buildings were open and kids were greeted, and it was business as it should be, even though on a pretty cold day. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, let's go to item G, public comment. I do believe that we have a familiar face with us tonight. This is Amber Rodriguez. So, thank you very much. Before we move to public comment, I would like to remind our audience of the board's procedures for handling public comment, which are found in Board Policy B2150 BEDH. Public comment is limited to 5 minutes per individual speaker. However, the board president may further restrict or waive these time limits based on the number of speakers. The board welcomes public input. The board does not prohibit public criticism or comment upon personnel matters, but does discourage personal attacks on board members, staff, personnel, or other persons. Presenters are cautioned that statements or representations concerning others that convey an unjustly unfavorable impression may subject the presenter to civil action. Any person making public comment shall be solely responsible for the content of his or her comments. The board neither adopts nor assumes responsibility for any comments made by individuals during the public comment section of the board meeting. And with that, I would like to introduce Mrs. Amber Rodriguez, if you would join us at the podium.
Good evening, Madam President, Board of the Las Lunas Public School Board of Education, Acting Superintendent, Mrs. Chavez. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I come today in prayer with Proverbs 9:10, which states, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." I pray for the children of Las Lunas Public Schools in the state of New Mexico to grow in wisdom and to include God in their thinking. I pray they make wise choices according to God's commandments. I pray Romans 12:10, which states, "Be tenderly devoted to one another and brotherly love, outdo one another in giving honor." I pray, O Lord, to help these children of Las Lunas Public Schools in the great state of New Mexico incorporate, please, and thank you in their daily actions with one another, including their fellow classmates, teachers, parents, and caregivers. Help them, O Lord, to learn to respect others and to put others' needs and interests before their own. I pray, O Lord, Matthew 5:14, which states, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." I pray that the children of Las Lunas Public Schools and New Mexico would grow in Jesus and have infinite satisfaction of seeing their lives shine in Christ, so that others may see, bringing honor and glory to God. And I close with a continued prayer for parents and caretakers of this state and this county to rise up and to lead their families in the ways of God, according to Proverbs 22:6. In Jesus' name, I pray these, and I thank you, Madam President, Acting Superintendent Mrs. Chavez, and school board members for the opportunity to pray tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. We appreciate you being here. That moves us to item H, the approval of consent items. I would stand for a motion regarding the consent items.
President, I would move that we would accept the consent items as presented.
And I'll second that.
So we need to restate that motion, Mr. Bennett, because we have to do all of the items. Would you be willing to restate it?
No.
No, we don't
No.
need to?
All the action items on the consent agenda,
Okay,
that's it. Anything else that was not on consent, those are things to discuss.
okay. You're right. I'm looking here. So thank you. Never mind.
Second.
I second that.
Mr. Talley.
Yes, Mr. Talley seconded. I'm sorry. Mr. Bennett has moved and Mr. Talley has seconded to approve all of the action items as listed on the consent sheet. There are no exceptions. Is there any discussion? So for the benefit of the audience, consent items are the action items on the agenda presented by the superintendent and staff for approval. All agenda items have been reviewed by the board members individually. If no discussion has been asked for regarding these items by any of the board members, the action items may be submitted for approval with one motion and vote. The action items that are not consented will be discussed prior to action being taken. So I'm going to call for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Were you supposed to call for discussion?
I did call for discussion.
I missed it.
You want, okay. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, I might just mention for people who have a copy of the agenda that it's items P through this all of item P all the way through to the end of item P, because there are a couple of other items that we are going to be asked to vote on that are not in this group. So just a clarification, that's just the item P items.
And it's also the item I, approval of the minutes from the regular board meeting, December 17th,
Oh.
2024. So we have
Right.
approval of I. So if you have the agenda, you can look and see the asterisk. So you'll see it by item I, and then you will see, as Mr. Vickers has stated, all of item P, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are for the consent items. So thank you, Mr. Vickers, for adding that. Is there any other discussion? Call for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Tally,
Yes.
Mrs. Simoia,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. We are now on to item K, the discussion and review of a board policy, which is our Title IX policy that was included, board members, in our work session. And a copy of it has also been included in your packet. The purpose for having this, in our most recent training that we all participated in, we were cautioned by one of the particular attorneys in one of the sessions that I went to talk about, or to make sure that our Title IX policies are A, in compliance, and B, properly adopted and approved, and C, that we are aware of them. So just as a board, that we're aware that we do have Title IX policies. So no action needs to be taken. This is just raising it to the level of our awareness and public awareness that we do have those policies. So for any member of the community that would have a question, we have those policies. So having said that, because this is just a discussion and review item, no action is being requested for. Is there any discussion concerning our Title IX that any board member would like to raise for our concern?
Just Madam President, on A-0250 on the non-discrimination / equal opportunity, should that top line say ACA? It says AC. I just want to make sure that there's not a typo on that.
Her policy, I believe so. I'm not sure what the
Okay.
copyright is,
Okay.
because that's a copyright.
Yeah, because A-0300, the non-discrimination, the basis of sex has ACA. A-0250, non-discrimination / equal opportunity just says AC. So I just wanted, just to make sure that that's not a typo. So. That's it.
Is there any other comments? We can get that corrected. Is there any other comments? Mr. Polly, you have a confusing.
So I was just gonna say, I just pulled up the policy and the policy just says AC, not
That's
AC.
interesting.
So it is in conformity, all the other policies in there do say ACA, ACB,
That is the,
AD, ADB, but this one is just AC.
is that the NSBA?
This is the NMSBA policy.
Yeah, we might want to check to see if that's.
We happen to have one of our legal advisors, and he has already stated something to the effect of questioning maybe the cross-referencing methodology here. By chance, sir, do you have a comment about that? Yeah. We have to have you over there, because nobody can hear you if you're not
Oh, a name for the record.
For the record, this is Gino Zamora. The, the attorney's on contract through the board. And I've been working on some policies. I have not worked specifically on this one. However, the way that these are numbered and lettered by the policy service has been somewhat of a mystery to me. And so I would just flag that it appears to follow the formatting of the policy service. But I would flag it when submitted with just a question to make sure that AC is the correct notation.
Yeah, the
Uh,
cross-reference does state on A-0300 cross-reference /AC. I was just curious, so that could be correct. But thank you for the cross-reference
And
notification.
When it's submitted by the administration to the policy service, they can just put a note to make sure that AC is the correct lettering.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Is there any other questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just, Title IX is is following federal statute. And I think we're all aware that that may very well change in the next few months. And we should be prepared to relook at it and see how we stand regarding compliance with it.
Absolutely. I definitely have this one flagged and watching it as we have different state or federal initiatives. So by chance, do you have any other words of wisdom for us? Because this is just discussion and this was really to raise it to the awareness so that we know that we need to be in full compliance and want to be in full compliance.
I do feel, Madam President, I do feel, and board members, I do feel this is one of those types of policies that should be reviewed at minimum annually. But I do note that with a change in the federal administration, that this is probably something that should be revisited on a 6-month basis. And maybe the administration can schedule a review in the June timeframe for coming back to the board in July. That said, I don't recommend delaying the policy until that point in time. If this policy, as it's been reviewed, reflects the current state of the law, then it should be adopted until such time as the federal laws or federal guidance has changed.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, sir.
You're welcome.
Is there any discussion? Any other discussion?
Yeah, Dr. Osowski,
Yes, please.
related to this policy in Title IX, we have lots of athletics, lots of different things going on. And one of the things that I want to make sure that we're in compliance with, and maybe we need to have a work session or something about it, is the boosters and how they comply not only with the rules that the district has set up, but how they comply with Title IX.
Do you have a specific concern? Tell, or do you think just a work session, those things might flesh out?
I think those things will flesh out in a work session. I just want to make sure that we are in compliance.
I will add it to our list. Thank you, Mr. Talley, for that. Absolutely. This item was for discussion and review. No action is needed or warranted at this time. We are now on to item L, presentation of board policy. This is our first formal reading. E-1000 School Safety and Security Department and School Resource Officers. And we welcome again to the podium our wonderful and esteemed attorney who's been guiding us through this. So I will turn this over to you
Thank
for your
you.
presentation.
Madam President, board members, superintendent, I want to start by thanking the board, the administration, the SROs and the Safety and Security Department for all the work that's been done over the last about 4 months to get to this first reading. The intent of this revised policy, and it's in your packet. It has some revisions from the last draft to this draft. But the intent of this policy was to provide a whole new E-1000 policy to accurately reflect the safety and security structure that you have for your school district. And because Los Lunas has one of the most sophisticated and most extensive safety and security department, this wasn't an easy task. And your current policy and previous iterations of your security policy, they do not reflect this structure. And so for not only legal purposes, but also insurance coverage purposes, it's very important to have an accurate reflection of the structure of safety and security that you're using, as well as including the models that have evolved in New Mexico over the last few years as they relate to training. And so that's what's incorporated here. You are going from an original policy of about a paragraph that left a lot of discretion in the superintendent just to provide for safety, to something very detailed that addresses conduct, training, provides definitions of what's allowed. And because you have safety and security and SROs that carry firearms to provide for the ultimate in safety, this type of depth of policy is needed. That is an evolution of school safety that has become essential over the last decade or two now, which is to have armed availability for that worst case scenario, which we've seen not only in state but nationally when it comes to active shooters on school campuses. And the standard, which not all schools have met, but you have, is to have an immediate ability to respond in those extreme circumstances. That said, what is before you, what is in your packet, constitutes the original drafting of the new policy with changes to reflect an accurate description of how school safety and security and the use of school resource officers is structured here. The most recent comments are strikeouts and new language. We reviewed at the work session last week. There have been no changes since last week. That's because we put this version in your packet the next morning. But I do not only recommend approval of this first reading, but I recommend approval of this first reading with a direction to me to conduct additional research and bring back changes that accurately reflect how the SROs will be able to comply with FERPA, number one, and how they will be able to comply with search and seizure requirements. And I stand for any questions and recommendations.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vickers, any questions or comments?
No, I don't know.
Mr. Bennett?
I just have a comment. Thank you very much. And I thank you that you got the input from all of us and the SROs to put this together so it's comfortable for everybody, but more importantly, protect them, this district, all of us. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mrs. Simoia?
Again, I echo Mr. Bennett's sentiments. Thank you for all the time that has gone into this. I really do appreciate that. The only comment that I have is we have addressed twice in second paragraph, the copy of the standard operating procedures developed by the Safety and Security Department, and it's referenced again in the last sentence of that paragraph. Have you had the opportunity to view those standard operating procedures? Because this is part of this document that the board will have to review once a year for this policy. So that has not been attached to any of the copies that I have had the opportunity to view during a work session. So if that could be made available to the board members for review before the next reading, I'd appreciate that.
Duly noted, and yes, there is a current version of the standard operating procedures.
Yeah.
And I'll work with the superintendent to have those included. I do have a copy of them.
Okay.
I've received.
Thank you.
Mr. Tally, any questions or comments?
No, I hope we can get this
Yes.
as quickly as possible because we need this policy. So that's it.
So I have two in addition to those that have been made. In the second paragraph, the second sentence, the department shall be managed by its Director of Safety and Security. I want to reiterate what I did say at the work session. We do not have memorialized in any other policy a specific position that would be in charge of any particular department. I wonder if this isn't crossing into the bounds of the superintendent's authority, because the superintendent is charged with the management of the district. So I'm concerned about having that line in there. I think that may be where we're crossing our boundaries. The last sentence in the second paragraph, at least annually, the Safety and Security Department shall present its standard operating procedures to the board for review and approval. I would like the board to consider those lines. As I stated in the work session, and I'll restate it here, at our most recent training, I did ask very explicitly 4 of the presenters how they felt and those were contemporaries in your particular industry, how they felt about standard operating procedures at department levels that could make decisions in terms of employment, so hiring and termination, and or for students. And since those operating procedures must be in compliance with board policy and state or federal law, and there are 5 persons who ultimately will stand legally, and this is a pretty important department. They have a pretty heavy load to carry. I would like to have the board consider adding the words "and approval" at the end of that particular line. Those would be my 2 inputs on this particular policy. I do want to say that I'm very pleased that the amount of work that has gone into this, it's starting to really look like a nice policy that I think we can be very proud of. And I do look forward to your additional research on FERPA and on search and seizure. I know that's an area we have to clean up. So this item was, I think that's all for questions and comments. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. This item was for the first reading of Board Policy E1000. No action is needed or warranted at this time. It will be brought back for the second reading at the February 18th board meeting. We are now moving on to item M, presentation of board policy. This will be the second reading. B900 board organizational meeting. And let's see if we can pull that out and if there is any discussion on that particular board policy. Mr. Vickers, I would like to begin with you because I know this is an item of concern for you. Do you have any discussion that you would like to bring to the board's attention?
Yes. Considering the fact that we just put this in practice earlier in this meeting, the procedures that we went through are not outlined in this policy, namely seconding a nomination. And I'm not sure if that is proper or not under Robert's rules, and I'd like there to be a specific statement in the policy, either that the second is required or that no second is required on nominations after reviewing what is proper based on Robert's rules.
Thank you for that. Mr. Bennett, any comment?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Simoia?
I have a quick comment. And again, it says basically for the purposes of organization of the board shall at a special meeting held on the first Tuesday in January, administer the oath of office to newly elected officers. If the first, Tuesday happens to fall on January 1st, which it could, school is usually out on holiday leave at that time. So would we be calling our employees into? Basically, we would need IT here, we would need Ms. Wolf here, we would need our superintendent in to conduct that meeting. The first Tuesday, perhaps that school is in session could be added to that language. And that's just to accommodate for the break.
Good point, Mrs. Simoia.
And then one final note. Should there be a circumstance where there is no ranking officer that returns? That could be, that could also be the case. So we haven't made basically call to order by the ranking officer. We don't have if there is no ranking officer, how the meeting would be called to order.
So looking at the second paragraph, it currently reads, the meeting shall be called to order by the president of the board for the preceding year. If that person is not a member of the board, period, that's
That should be a
sentence.
comma. That should be a comma.
Yeah,
Mhm. And go to the lower.
correct. The meeting shall be called to order by the ranking officer.
So in a
Is
sense,
it possible,
Yeah.
right, it is possible that 3 persons would be leaving.
Yeah.
Okay, the person calling the meeting shall preside until the successor is elected. So we could add in there the meeting, if a ranking officer is not returning, the meeting shall be called to order by the member with I'm going to say this clumsy, with the highest years of service.
And just be maybe designated by the superintendent.
no, super.
So you could have a situation where the other 2 members both have served the same amount of time, so.
That's true.
What about a motion by the member, because any member can make a motion and any member can make a second, so we could possibly, somebody could make a motion for the acting.
So you still have the issue of who will gavel the meeting to.
Make the motion to have someone gavel the meeting and that person then would basically gavel the meeting. Whoever is elected or nominated and voted into the president position would then assume that gavel. And the appointed or said nominee. It'll be some language to write that in there, but there could be a consideration where there is no ranking board member, which is interesting. Yeah. You can bring in 5 people new. Yep. And this is the second reading of it, so
we may need to table a vote on this and see the new lighting or the new wording, because I do agree with Mr. Vickers about the second. I also agree, or I also would want to see about the requirement for a person to agree that they would be willing to serve in that position, because I do believe,
So
Mr.
we have
Vickers,
input from,
we have an
Expert
expert.
We have an expert sitting,
we have
Here.
two maybe, I don't know.
Oh.
Mr. Zamora, are you familiar enough with Robert's rules to deal with that question?
Madam President, Board Member Vickers, not necessarily about schools, but board policies and election issues relating to the board. I think the deleted, so a few things to think about on that second paragraph. One, the deleted sentence, if actually moved down to say if there is not, if there are no ranking officers, then you could go into a temporary, it doesn't have to be president, it could be meeting chair. More artfully phrased than meeting presider, but that concept, number one. Two, I was trying to pull it up on my phone. You have a process for calling special meetings, and you may want to just reference that process. Typically, that is, I'm having trouble manipulating my phone through the policy service, but depending on your policy, that's usually called at the request of 2 board members. So you would, in an election year where 3 board members are coming in new and they haven't been sworn in yet, you're gonna have 2 board members remaining. So under your board policy for calling special meetings, you likely could have the 2 remaining board members or the 2 holdover board members call the meeting. So I'm just brainstorming with you. It's the first time I'm seeing it, but I think you can quote the process for calling a special meeting and then also in those highly unusual but quite possible circumstances that you don't have a ranking officer, then you should have a temporary chair call the meeting. Elected and a meeting call, selected and a meeting call. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. I was wondering, David Gardner, do you have an opinion on that?
Would you be willing, sir, to go to the mic? Because otherwise our YouTube watchers cannot hear you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Dr. David Gardner,
Thank you, sir.
member of the community. Yes, so Mr. Zamora referred to a temporary chairman. That's typically what's done when you start other kinds of conventions or meetings where there is no permanent chairman yet. What's a little different here is that you're within electing a chairman to elect another chairman. And that seems a little bit like it's more cumbersome than it needs to be. So I need to do some research on that. It wouldn't take more than a couple minutes. I didn't bring my copy of Robert's Rules of Order, unfortunately. I could easily get that to you, there. That's helpful.
Thank you.
I think,
I'm sure I have a copy of Robert's Rules at home. I can look for it, but there's also a national organization that deals with Robert's Rules that I've been in on talks with them at the national conferences. And I think they have like a hotline you can call for an expert opinion on something.
I think that would be awesome, Mr. Vickers. I know that what I looked at today did talk about there being a second required. However, Mr. Gardner, I hear your concern. You're electing a temporary chair to then turn around and elect a president. But I think the biggest purpose of having a temporary chair is to call the meeting to order and conduct the meeting up until the point in time that the reorganization occurs on the agenda. So you couldn't call the meeting to order without somebody being elected chair, the temporary appointed. I do really like the idea because we have been very good on this board about trying to make these policies as comprehensive and that they stand alone as possible. So I do like the idea of adding the reference of the process to call a special meeting into here. I think that would be important. But we do have some information I think that we need to look up. And this being the second reading, this has me a little concerned. We have more discussion on the second reading than we had on the first one. So this item was for the second reading of the board policy B 0900. No action is needed or warranted at this time. It will be brought back for possible action at the February 18th board meeting. And I'm,
Dr. Osowski,
yes, sir.
I just want to, I concur with what Mr. Vickers was saying about adding the wording in about whether we need to,
Sure, we need to find it out.
yeah.
Absolutely. We have lots of things that have to happen in here. So, Mr. Zamora, you helped Mr. Vickers with this particular policy as well, did you not? Okay. Mr. Vickers, maybe you can help remind me which person helped us with this, but maybe we need to take this back to that particular person and have them add to this policy before the February 18th board meeting to address these other concerns. Is there any other concern that we need to look at in this? Definitely the process.
I don't know.
Okay, having no other discussion, we will move on to item N. Presentation and approval of the district student calendar. Mrs. Chavez, turn this over to you.
Thank you so much. I would like to have Mrs. Montano present the calendar and the process that we have prepared and what was completed to reach this point. Ms.
Thank
Montano.
you. Madam President, members of the board, if you were part of the calendar committee, would you please stand up? I want to thank these individuals for being part of our committee. We met several times, and a special thank you to Mr. and Mrs. White for being here tonight. Thank you for taking the time to do all that you do. I am not going to present this on my own. I have selected a few people to help us. Isaac Caramillo from Personnel, who's a specialist there. He's going to be helping us as well. Scott Fleischer, a computer lab assistant at Ann Parish Elementary. Matt Pendrak, the principal of Los Lunas Elementary, and Monica Rivera, who is our elementary director. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Isaac.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, and Acting Superintendent Chavez. If we move to the next slide, these are a list of all of our committee members. Originally, when the committee was created, excuse me, we started by contacting 3 parents from each school site. Of all of those parents that we contacted, 9 were willing to volunteer to this committee. In addition to those 9 volunteers that were parents, other members that joined the committee were staff of our school district, and it was spread out from departments, it was spread out. We selected members or had members volunteer from each department of our school district. In addition to those members that volunteered, we also had NEA representation. Thank you.
Madam President, members of the Los Lunas School Board, Acting Superintendent Chavez. So to start off with our timeline, on October 10th, we had an in-house committee meeting where we went over the requirements from PED, also including our holidays and federal observed days that we have to have off. At the beginning of the school year, we had a survey sent out to our stakeholders, and it was reviewing what they wanted from our next year's calendar. On October 21st, 24th was our first committee meeting. We established our norms. We reviewed the survey data from our stakeholders, along with reviewing the requirements from PED, such as how many days as students have to come to school, number of PDs we have to have off, and what days we have to have off. We began exploring options such as what would our days look like if we started early versus starting late. On November 14th, we continue exploring these options and started creating our ideal calendars. Just trying to plan out what we would want in our calendars each year. We also went and came up with questions to ask our stakeholders about our calendar. The next meeting was on November 14th. It was our second meeting. Actually, our third meeting was November 12th, which was we came back with the questions that we had from our stakeholders and concerned, and we narrowed down our calendars from, I believe, 6 down to 2. On December 18th, which was 2 days before we went on break, NEA started the review from December 18th to January 6th, and we had 75% agree with the outcome and move forward with our next steps. On January 9th, we sent out the vote for communities to vote on which calendar they liked. They got them via Remind message, and we advertised them on social media, along with the community was easily able to find them on our website.
Madam President, members of the Los Lunas School Board, Acting Superintendent, Mrs. Chavez. The biggest part, I think, of this was basically figuring out what our parameters were from PED. And these parameters, these are hard and fast parameters. And they really acted as boundaries for us and did provide us with several different avenues, believe it or not, for creating a calendar. With those several different avenues, we had to operate within a structure. So we had 181 days for students, for Los Lunas students, 191 days for certified teachers. That is inclusive of 10 professional development days. You'll see later on maximum of 5 at the beginning of the year, first 5 days. A total of 1,140 hours for students through the year. Now, PED classifies a full day as 5.5 hours and a half day as 3.5. Our current daily schedule accommodates 6.5 hours, 6.5 hours of instruction per day. PED also allows us to have up to 4 remote learning days, or 32 hours, 8 hours per day. We can build into the calendar, or what Los Lunas has decided what we're going to do is bank those days for inclement weather. Now that came in handy earlier in the year, rather than just putting them in certain spots in the year. This does help us, and those days are 50% synchronous learning. This is important to note, the instructional hours aren't double counted as both instructional hours with students and professional work hours. Parent-teacher conferences, that's what PTC means. Parent-teacher conferences count as instructional days this year. There will be, or for next year, 2 days of those. And in the bargaining season coming up in the spring, the NEA will determine which dates those parent-teacher conferences are going to occur. And again, as I said earlier, 10 embedded professional development days, with 5 happening in both versions of the calendar, both iterations. 5 of those are happening right at the beginning of the year, before students arrive, and then 5 dispersed throughout the year.
So we have here the required days off. And the one thing I want to point out, most of those days we've always had off. But what is new now is the election day, November 4th, regardless of if it's a general election, local election, we have to have that specific day off. That falls on a Tuesday. That makes the calendar a little bit fun, and it makes that week a whole lot of fun. So we do have to take November 4th. So that is something new that we have to add to our calendar. And on the next slide, the survey we sent out at the beginning of the school year were the first days of school. And one of the things that we found really interesting is that there was an area for free response, open response, where parents could comment on anything they wanted to on their first days of school. And they did comment on several different things. But we did have 31 comment that in one way or another, that summer was too short. I believe that is something that needs to be noted, that this was not a provoked question. It was something that they answered on their own. The other thing that we noticed from that survey at the beginning of the school year is that 75% of our secondary parents liked having the jump start day, so we needed to make sure we built in time for that. 67% of our parents liked or really had no opinion on starting on a Thursday, and we have some explanation to that as well. 80% of our elementary parents liked having open house before school, before that first day of school. Another thing that we needed to make sure we kept in our calendar. And 57% of our pre-K and our kindergarten parents disliked starting students on a Monday. For that young age, that full week was a difficult start for them.
So we presented two different calendar options to the community. Looking at both calendars, they both started on 8/1 and end on 5/21. And as Ms. Montano mentioned, our pre-K students start 2 days after our first through 12th grade students. And because of that, our kindergarten students would be able to start not on a Monday, but rather on a Tuesday, which accommodates some of those concerns from parents from last school year or from this current school year. On calendar B, there is a PD day on September 22nd. Both calendar options have a professional development day on October 14th. On calendar A, there is a full PD day on December 19th. On calendar B, there is a half-day PD day on December 19th. On calendar A, there is a PD day on January 6th. On calendar B, there is a PD day option on April 6th. On calendar A, there is a full PD day on May 22nd, as opposed to calendar B that has a half day on May 22nd. So now for the exciting reveal, our district, our community, we had 702 responses, and there was an overwhelming amount of 58.4% to go with calendar A as the recommended calendar for Los Lunas.
And for any questions?
Do we have any questions from members of the board about this presentation? Mr. Vickers, I'll start with you. Do you want me to come back to you, Mr. Vickers?
I don't have.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, do you have any questions?
Just on the 22nd, you say it's a half day professional development. Is that a kid still here then, or they're already gone?
So that was on calendar B, and it would have been a half day for students and then a full day for staff, and that latter part of the day would be professional development. But just to note that calendar B didn't win the community vote.
Mrs. Simoia, any questions or comments?
Looking at the calendar for the start date of the 25th of July for staff, that's a professional development day.
Yes,
Is that a full day or is that a half day?
So the professional development days at the beginning of the year for our staff are full days.
So you're asking staff to come back on Friday, the 25th of July on calendar A, and their last day would be a full day through May 22nd, correct?
Yes.
Which gives them that week, which Memorial Day starts. That's when they start their vacation, would be Memorial Day weekend.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And students would start their vacation the day earlier.
Any other questions or concerns?
No, thank you. Thank you for the a thorough report, by the way. Thank you very much.
Mr. Tally?
Yeah, I have a few comments. First, thank you to everybody who participated in the committee. I know it's difficult, having done it a couple times, and I understand, you know, before I did it, I didn't understand all the different roadblocks, and I have a better understanding of that now. I do have a couple questions though. So it says we can do remote learning days up to 4 days. And it says we will bank these for inclement weather or emergency. I'm somewhat opposed to the remote learning. Just because my experience with students, the last time we had to do that, half of them didn't have power at their home, and so there was zero remote learning done.
Absolutely.
And I think that we need to build in to the calendar at least 1 day for inclement weather. Maybe we don't use it, or maybe we do. I think it's more likely that we're gonna have 1 day that there's gonna be an issue and we can't come to school. And I would much rather have an inclement weather day built into it than to have the remote no learning happening. I mean, that's something that I think that is really important. Because I know the teachers try, I know the administration tries, but I also, after spending the whole year of COVID online and seeing how poorly, how ineffectual the online learning is, I think we are doing the students a disservice by going remote rather than having a built-in inclement weather day.
So just out of curiosity, you're suggesting that we would have 1 day built into the calendar. So if indeed we did have an inclement weather or an emergency, then we would just go to school on that additional day. What would happen if we had more than 1 day?
So the community I grew up in built in a few extra days for inclement weather. If we ended up not using those days, then we got to get out of school a couple days early. If we had to use more, then a day was added to the end. It didn't happen very often, but it's something that we have to consider.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So let me redo my math here real quick. 181 days, and we're going 6.5 hours.
Yes.
So that puts us at 1176. I'm not averse to having the extra time, but is there a reason that we are going an hour extra every day?
So I'm not really sure how our schedule, I mean, we have buses that we accommodate in our schedule. And in order to make sure that we have enough hours at our secondary school with our passing period and our lunches, that's how we've built those schedules. The other thing is that we do have to stick to the 181. That is our requirement. So even if we wanted to extend our day and have less days on the calendar, by law, at this point in time, we're not allowed to do that.
So we can't take off a few minutes to shorten that day to, I mean, we're at 1176 hours. We
Right.
only need to be to 1140, so that's a difference of 36 hours. So we can't.
And
Ms.
if I may,
Chavez.
if we do take off days, it will impact how we're funded because.
I'm
the
not suggesting
original-
take off days, I'm
Right.
suggesting maybe shorten the day.
So that could be a consideration, but then we look at how we've already scheduled with the bus routes. So there's many factors that are considered as part of how many hours students are in school. So, and I did the math too, it's more hours, but because we decided at the time and that was during the 1920 school year, when we moved to extended learning time, that did increase our calendar. We had one option to decrease the days, and I believe we did that for the 22-23 school year. And once we stuck with that, that's what our funding formula began. We were stuck on that number
Okay.
of 181 days. And then the requirement was 1140. It used to be different with the number of hours that required for elementary versus secondary. And that was changed as part of a House bill or Senate bill a few years ago.
All right.
So I know in the lunch period, the 30 minutes does not count during
Correct.
our instructional time. Passing period does count because you have certified personnel on duty, so it's considered part of it. So I see where Mr. Talley is going, though, with those additional 32 hours, because we have 1176 and we need 1140 for those extra 32 hours or the 4 days. Instead of calling those remote learning days, could we have those banked in as true snow days?
Because we go additional time with the days?
No, not additional, but instead of calling them remote learning days, could we say, if, for instance, if we did have 4 days of snow, nasty weather, that we don't monkey around with the remote, who can hook up, who can't work up, and the other types of assignments or whatnot, but we truly just call them snow days if we've got the extra 32 hours. Can we do that?
I think we still have to meet the requirement for 181 days.
I'm not saying that we would take them off. I'm saying that if we don't need to use them, we are in school 181 days, 1,176 hours. But if we have 4 days, like the days in November, that we just call those snow days, because we're still meeting, it still is on our calendar.
So you're building them in, is that what you're?
Well,
Can you give me
they're already
examples?
built in.
So hour-wise, it's built in because we have 36 hours.
But they're not
We don't-
counting
but
the
they're not-
hours, they're counting.
They
the
count the
day.
actual day.
It goes
Correct.
back to the days.
Yeah,
Correct.
We've tried, we've asked those questions, we've asked them 10 different ways. We've asked different people to see if that would be something that is allowable. And we keep receiving the answer, you must meet the 181 days.
So and that's until we have this lawsuit settled
Correct.
across the state.
Yeah.
So once that lawsuit is settled, this could be a different game
Correct.
for next year.
Correct. And I have not heard the latest update. I know that the last hearing was in September or October. And it is, we are still continue to wait for the judge's decision.
Right.
And I don't know why it's taking as long as it has. The last conversation about this was probably early fall regarding the lawsuit.
Maybe our legislature will do something with that. This 60 days. Okay, I definitely though am in perfect harmony with Mr. Talley in terms of remote learning. We have got to do something different. In the morning, as you know, the dogs get walked and there's lots of bus stops between me and the end of the dog walk. And I do stop and talk with parents and I check in with kids. And I have yet, not one time have I heard, oh, my instruction was so awesome. As a matter of fact, my phone rings and I don't dare go anywhere in public if we have a remote learning day. The instruction, it is non-instruction. So I think that can be something that as a board, we have to address because even though it's built in here, you can go on many different social media sites and we do not have community sports when it comes to remote learning. It's not there. The quality isn't there. So that's just a comment. Committee members, how many of these were parents again?
So we had 9 that participated.
9. So we have 15 school sites. We called 3 parents
From each side.
and 9 out of 45.
Thank you.
We actually had quite a few say that they would be there, and then we had 9 that showed up.
So we didn't, why, who identified the 3?
Mostly the principals.
Okay. How many of those parents were also employees of the district out of the 9
So
that showed up?
that was actually the requirement of the principal was to not solicit parents that were
Okay.
employees. of-
So all
So
9
9 are pure parents. They were not, so like right here behind me, I have parents
Right.
that are employees. They're
right.
not counted as parents here.
Okay.
9 additional.
So we had true parents. So that's an improvement from
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
2 to 9. So I'll take that improvement. Thank you. Thank
And
you
we
very
had
much.
more, I believe, that did say that they would attend and then They
had
did not.
had
They did not.
emergencies and, yeah.
Okay. And then, when you talked about some of the options, how were committee members allowed to bring options to the committee? How did you handle that?
So what we did is we actually had calendars that from EPS, we had some calendars from Las Cruces, we had calendars from Arizona. What we did is we pieced together all of those calendars. We spent 2 days in our committee where we actually had calendars printed out on butcher paper and we were highlighting, days, and then we'd stretch out the days and, what if we move this day here and that day there? And we did several renditions of that.
Okay, and then our spring break, does that coincide with UNMVC and or UNM, or who does that coincide with?
UNMBC, UNM, and NMSU. Tech has not put their calendar out, so we don't know what their spring break is, but we are in line with the two big colleges.
Does it align with Belen as well? Do you know?
Usually Belen aligns with UNMBC, so
I was gonna say,
traditionally we seem to have the same.
thank you.
Yeah.
And then I noticed for Thanksgiving, for calendar A, which was the winner,
Yes.
with 58.4% of the vote, is it only the 26th, 27th, and 28th? So it's not the full week?
It's not the full week, it's only the 3
Okay,
days.
so we've cut down time there.
Yeah. And if you'll notice in November, that's when we have those 2 Tuesdays as well, that we are required to take off. So that's really where we kind of ate the days.
I'm glad to hear that because that was really disruptive this last year. So, and our instruction seemed to just get so piecemealed by that period in time. And since I think we're all a little bit concerned about our academic outcomes, that's a concern. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your service.
Thank you,
for being on the committee. Thank you for your presentation.
You guys, I appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
guys.
I would stand for a motion regarding the district student calendar for the 25-26 school year.
Madam President,
Yes, ma'am.
I would move that we elect calendar A, which was the overwhelming choice of the community vote.
Thank you, Mrs. Simoia and Mr. Bennett.
Second that.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Simoia has moved and Mr. Bennett has seconded to approve the adoption of calendar A as presented to the board this evening. Is there any discussion?
Dr. Osowski, I do feel strongly about the remote learning days and having a day built in for whatever, whether it's inclement weather or something else. I know that maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but man, the lack of learning that happens those days, and then we still get, I guess, credit for having students in class that day. It does seem like a disservice to the students academically.
I am wondering, Mr. Talley, if that isn't something we could address with the board policy. That we could work on writing. We would be maybe one of the first in the state because we've already been the first in the state on a few others. That we could talk about the criteria of what occurs with remote learning. So then that way it's non-negotiable.
I think that might also have to go in front of the collective bargaining with the teachers that are responsible for it. So this might be something to assign to our acting superintendent to kind of look into as to how to make this valuable prepared lesson plan so that there is actually released to the parents what the remote learning would look like in such a circumstance where they don't have the ability to go online. What is the delay or something like that? Rather than it being a board policy, it goes back to the educational thing with
Maybe we put
foundation.
that on our list of work session.
To
because
discuss.
This has come up,
Yeah.
last year it came up and
Yeah.
it's coming up again this year.
Absolutely. So, and that might be an opportunity to have some educators participate in that as well.
Correct. And just for informational purposes, we did during the pandemic, we did have to work with our local union regarding how remote learning looked because that was part of the requirements at the time. And we had an MOU Ms. Fleischer, remind me how long it was. It was a number of pages that we did have at the time. It was lengthy, and so we have since condensed it because it is not something that we use every single day. So we do have a plan, but we can always get better.
I would appreciate that. Is there any other discussion regarding item N? Mr. Vickers, any comment? Mr. Bennett?
But I agree with you, colleagues and yours. I don't know if he has a recommendation for which days we designate as those inclement weather days that might be used.
So I had a thought while we were, while discussion was going on. When does the calendar have to be finalized? Is there like a date that we have to have the calendar finalized?
Ms. Bonfanno can assist us with that question.
So, Madam President, members of the board, acting superintendent, yes, we do have to have it done in order for spring budget because they use our calendar to, to give us our funding for that. Also, we need to get prepared for professional development and all of the things that come at the beginning of the school year. We start working on those as soon as next week.
So we can't table this for till the next board meeting and have
Well, you-
time to discuss it?
You have a motion and a second on the table, so it
That's
doesn't
right.
have to come to a vote.
Correct.
It does. He's still asking for discussion.
Yeah.
So I think one of the questions was, when do we have to consider this? The community asks us almost immediately when we start a new school year, what is next school year going to look like? Because we have people who plan years out. If there's a special occasion that's going to happen in their life, they want to know what that calendar is going to look like. They also look immediately for graduation. So the sooner the better, because we do need to schedule graduation dates. And this year, because of the way the calendar is aligned with UNM graduation and our graduation, our students are graduating on a Monday, which is not traditionally what's happened in Los Angeles schools. We've always had that Saturday. So it does help us with planning for professional development. And it also, this is really important to consider when our staff is planning their summer vacations. A lot of our staff start planning now because of the price of vacations and according to everybody's schedules. So those are additional reasons why we look at bringing in the calendar when we did.
So it seems like we're up against the wall most. Perhaps next year we look at doing the calendar a little bit earlier. So if there's concerns, there's time to address them.
I think we can address how we're going to deal with the snow days or the remote learning days. In either one of these calendars. I think more specifically, these are the calendars that the committees have selected based upon start date, based upon, and again, the very strict criteria that PED has set forth as far as the dates. But I think we're all in agreement that there can be a little bit more emphasis on what is presented during remote learning opportunities. But I think it was a very creative way of not extending the calendar to account for these days, to bring our students and educators into that week. Okay, you gotta go home for Memorial Day, but you're gonna have to come back the next day. So I think that was in great consideration of that. But I do think that there needs to be some value rather than it's just a snow day. And we rarely use these. And I would love a snow day that closes us down because I need that moisture on my field. But other than that, it doesn't have to be so cold.
So I have a question. We talk about in the presentation, 50% synchronous learning for remote learning days. So how does that work for high school? Where they have 6 classes?
So what they do at the high school level is they send out a schedule to the students of how much time or of the class periods that they'll jump into. So they follow it just like a regular school day. I'll go to first period, second period, third period, just check in with those teachers and half of that time that they are scheduled in that class should be with the teacher and the other half could be on their own. That's how they deal with it at the high school level.
So I heard should.
When did
I
I'm
really
sorry.
like shall.
I don't know what I say. I'm
No,
sorry.
you said should be. The teachers jump in, they should be there 50% of the class period.
Yes. They will be there.
They shall be there. Does it shall the?
It's,
I really honestly,
So. it's Law or requirement. For that day that they have to have 50%.
Yes, that.
How do we measure that? 50% of the students attending. So I'm pretty sure that on this last day that we had remote learning, we did not have 50% even with power.
So it's not 50% of attendance, it's 50% of the schedule of that day. So the 50% is our onus, not necessarily the student's onus, if that makes sense. So it's not counted based off of our attendance, it's based off of how we scheduled that day for them.
sure, so but
It's
if
the
if the
opportunity.
schedule for first period is 8 to 8:55, just as an example, the teacher would be expected to be in there 26 minutes,
Yes,
27 minutes, sorry. math. 27.
roundabout.
And then, okay, thank you for answering that. Then I noticed also on the PowerPoint, 10 embedded professional development days. What professional development occurs on the last contract day
that's gonna be good.
in May?
So I actually did speak with a representative from Public Education Department to discuss that specifically. And we can use time in the classroom as part of our professional development. We also can use part of that planning for next year, and we will be requiring some of that day to be an agended planning for next year. So that might be an opportunity for teachers to share some of the standards that they were able to complete, maybe in second grade to the third grade teacher, or some of the pieces of the curriculum that might have been a little bit more, I need you to go back to this piece with those kids. And we do a lot of that vertical professional development, and it'll be another opportunity to do a little bit of that as well. And then a little bit of time in their classroom.
One thing that we do not have in this year's calendar is any more staffed professional development days for the remainder of the school year. So last year, we had already passed our lateral windows, we had passed transfer windows, so new staff at their new school site were able to go and attend the new school that they were joining and participate in staff development. We do not have that this school year. Returning to that next school year, staff who transfer from, say they're at Los Lunas Middle School and transfer to Valencia High School, they will be able to start planning with their new teams. And they'll have I don't want to say jump start, but they'll have the opportunity to start planning for next school year at the end of the year.
So does the teacher's contract end on May 22nd?
Correct. And this year, when our students go home, our teachers go home. So it's a full day of school.
Because that could have been the designated day,
Could have
snow
been.
day. It could have been on that 22nd. So we could have had students there. And then if we don't need it, then they go home on the 21st.
Then we would have to bring staff back the day after
Right.
Memorial Day for professional development to meet our 10 professional development days.
Okay, boy, this is really just a nasty puzzle, isn't it?
It is.
Until we can
It's
control.
a nasty puzzle.
That's.
Is there any more discussion?
Ourselves.
I'm going to do a point of order and call for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Bennett?
I vote yes.
Mr. Tally?
Just to clarify, this was the motion to approve calendar.
To adopt, yeah, to adopt.
I vote yes.
Mrs. Simoia?
And I'll vote yes.
I will also vote yes. The motion passes 5-0. Again, thank you,
Thank you,
everybody, for your
guys.
comments. Breath?
Sorry.
No, it needs, these are good comments. There really has to happen. We're on item O, discussion and approval of the process and timeline for the evaluation of the acting superintendent. So for those persons who were not present or participate in the work session that the board held last week, we have this as an agenda item. State law does require that every certified employee of a district receive an annual evaluation, and every district, including Los Lunas, does set a schedule of when all annual evaluations are to be completed. So that we're in compliance with state law, and then B, to make sure that employees have the opportunity to understand their areas of strength and opportunities for growth, and then also to be planning for professional development or other types of supports that employees may be needing as they go through the evaluation process. As we worked through the work session and we talked about many topics, we covered quite a few things. We covered that for our acting superintendent, who is really carrying two hats. She's A, acting superintendent, and then B, she is also still the assistant superintendent over special services, correct?
Correct.
So we most certainly need to pay attention to the state statute in terms of requiring that she is evaluated. And so we would need to make sure as the Board of Education that we are timely and in compliance with state law. So the first topic that we talked about as a board, so this is again just for review before we move in to discussion and approval of the process and timeline for evaluation. The first thing that we talked about was what instrument to evaluate Mrs. Chavez would we use? And we had robust conversations. All of us have lots of terrific thoughts in terms of what can we do to make this the most beneficial for Mrs. Chavez, as she has willingly and kind of naggingly been reminding us that she needs to be evaluated. And we like her diligence and dedication to that particular process. So the first item of discussion was the instrument. Should we identify or develop a new instrument specific to Mrs. Chavez? Or should we go with something that has been used in the state to evaluate licensed administrators? And that was brought to us as it's affectionately known to as the Licensed Administrator Competencies Evaluation, Form C. If we go with a new instrument, the pros to identifying or developing a new instrument is that it could be very specific to what the board has asked of Mrs. Chavez in the acting superintendency role. So since July 24th, 2024. So it could be very specific to what we've asked her to do. It could address the board's goals and focus areas. Are there other pros that I missed, board members, from that discussion that we would bring up? This is just a review for the community because we had community who weren't present. Were there others? The cons we had to identifying or developing a new instrument actually came from two of our cabinet members, and we appreciate their intentionality and their presence in that conversation as well. Deputy Superintendent Brian Baca and Assistant Superintendent Andrew Size raised the concerns that the board did not provide Mrs. Chavez at the time of her appointment to the position of acting superintendent specific goals or targets while serving as the acting superintendent, which means we would be developing something now and then evaluating her on it now where she would have had no time. So that was a very fair concern to this being a con to identifying or developing a new instrument. Another concern was that the board has not convened to review and discuss the existing board goals and focus areas this year, and most especially since Mrs. C. Moya was selected to the vacant position for the geographic area known as District 2 of the Los Lunas Schools District. And the board has not included Mrs. Chavez in discussions about priorities of the board. And the goals for Mrs. Chavez as the acting superintendent were not collaboratively determined prior to Mrs. Chavez being appointed to the position and then her willingly accepting it. Were there other cons that I missed in my summary?
Well, the other thing was also that this the evaluation that we're looking at, the Form C, was something that we already use with current employees, and it'd be not fair to her pulling out some other form that our present employees aren't being evaluated on.
That is correct. So along the lines of the instrument conversation was using the Licensed Administrator Competencies Evaluation Form C. And the pros are just as Mr. Bennett has said, it would be familiar to Mrs. Chavez as she has been an administrator in this district for many years. It has been used throughout the state for decades as the evaluation tool for licensed school administrators. We can add comments on the narrative comment section of Form C. And the con would be from our conversation at the work session is that it does not address the board's goals and focus areas. It is binary. In other words, it is yes or no. Were there other cons that I missed in my summary?
I think you got them all.
Think I got them all. So I believe that we should step into this particular item very systematically and very intentionally. So I believe that the first thing I would like to ask for is a motion about which instrument would be for the board's preference in evaluating Mrs. Chavez. Do I have a motion?
Now, Madam President, just for clarification, as far as the instrument, we discussed in our work session, the competencies basically for Form C. So the instrument basically, or a motion could be on the instrument using said competencies that are familiar as Form C, correct?
That is correct.
With that, Madam President, I would like to move that for the instrument of the evaluation, the Board of Education uses the Las Lunas Schools Licensed Administrator Competencies Evaluation Form C, specifically in regards to the 9 competencies that are listed in the evaluation of our acting superintendent, Ms. Chavez.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. So the motion was made by Mrs. Simoia and seconded by Mr. Bennett for the board to utilize the Los Lunas Schools Licensed Administrator Competencies Evaluation Form C, specifically addressing the 9 essential competencies. Is there any discussion?
Dr. Osowski,
Sir?
I like the way that it was phrased because I think it leaves us open to make it non-binary. And I think that though Ms. Chavez is used to the yes, no, pass, fail type of thing, I think it would actually be more meaningful if we made some sort of scale. So we use these competencies, but instead of pass, fail, we could use a scale of like 1 to 5 or something like that.
Thank you for that. I am going to ask you to hold on that because I would like to talk about that in the next sub motion.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
So, but the motion is for
Right.
Form C,
Mhm.
which is a binary, yes, no.
No,
Yes.
the motion on the table is not for Form C. The motion on the table
Is for the 9 essential.
is using the competencies on Form C.
Yes.
Okay, that's the clarification.
That's the
Yes.
clarification.
Is for the competencies, not the form.
Yes. Yeah, oh, here we go. Okay, so, and I believe it was, who seconded? You get to repeat what I said. All right, so, my motion was to utilize Form C specifically in regards to the competencies, the 9 competencies that are listed, essential administrative competencies in the evaluation of our acting superintendent, Ms. Chavez. So right now, the motion is only to discuss the competencies for evaluation. As we had mentioned in the discussion,
Right.
they were binary, they're yes, no. She is in a unique position of carrying an assistant superintendent position and an acting superintendent position. So they're really one form. These are great competencies for an administrator. And I think from there, we can provide in another discussion, opportunities for it to be non-binary, to go away from a binary and offer a scaled opportunity for growth.
Is there any other discussion for clarification? I will call for the vote on the first motion to adopt the competencies as
For evaluation purposes.
the evaluation for Mrs. Chavez's annual evaluation to utilize the 9 essential competencies as identified on the Los Angeles Schools Licensed Administrator Competencies Evaluation Form C. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mrs. Simoia,
Yes.
Mr. Tally,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Now, in alignment with that, we did have terrific conversations about how to score. Would you be willing to put up the PDF document, please, gentlemen? Thank you. So as we've already talked, on Form C, it is binary. Yes, you are competent, or yes, the administrator is competent. No, the administrator is not competent. Something that we did talk about, Mrs. Simoia, during the work session, did raise some good discussion about a yes, no, or a binary system does not allow for opportunities to identify areas of strength or areas where the administrator is not competent. So what I did from that conversation was I went and looked for examples that would fit a multi-point system if we wanted to look at doing something other than just the binary system. And it would be a scale between highly competent, competent being the midpoint, competent with reservations, or not competent. So ranging from 0 point to 3 points per section of each competency. And this was just an example I put together for some sub-rating descriptors. So for instance, if you look at the wording in competency number 1, the administrator demonstrates foresight, examines issues, and takes initiatives to improve the quality of education in the community. There are really 3 criteria for the root. The root is the administrator improves the quality of education in the community. So another way to read this would be evidence exists, it has been brought to the attention of the board, that the administrator has improved the quality of education in the community by demonstrating foresight. And under highly competent, and this is an example, the board would need to, of course, adopt something. Under highly competent, for instance, the administrator identified a potential topic of interest for the board that was not on the radar of the board, the state educational agency, or Department of Education, whereas competent would be a topic of interest emerged in some format, and the administrator recognized it as a potential topic of interest for the board that was not on the radar. Competent with reservations, some other key stakeholder group identified a topic of interest for the board. Or not competent, no evidence exists the administrator has demonstrated foresight in terms of identifying a potential topic for the board. Now, the purpose of doing this is to be very clear about the differences between highly competent, competent, competent with reservations, and or not competent. So this wording was just an example. It is not meant to be adopted tonight. What would be meant to be presented for possible or for discussion is to have a scale such as this for each one of the 9 competencies, and how this could be scored. Would you please go down for me? So there's descriptors for examining issues. Please go down. And there would be descriptors for taking initiatives. Please scroll down. And how this could potentially be scored. Now, there's a variety of ways to score this. One would be that each board member, under each one of the descriptors for competency number 1, would score on 0, 1, 2, or 3 points. So I just put numbers up here to make it interesting. And there would be an overall mean by the board member. A mean is an average. So for board member A, because each score is a 3, the mean would be a 3. Whereas for board member B, where there is a 3, a 2, and a 3, the mean would be a 2.67. Looking at that, the overall mean, just stay right there, please, would be calculated for each one of the board members participating and evaluating on each one of the characteristics of competency number one. The overall mean could be calculated with this fictitious data to be a 2.2. Another consideration that's always kind of illuminating when you're making these kinds of decisions, especially with a group of evaluators, is to look at the overall mode. The mode is which rating showed up the most for a particular evaluator. So for instance, under board member A, 3 was the mode because board member A selected 3 times. However, if you look at board member C selected 2 more times than 3, so that mode is a 2. So some findings that can happen with this type of a scoring mechanism is you can make these kinds of findings, for instance, for each competency. Overall, 4 of the 5 board members scored the superintendent as competent or highly competent, and we would use the overall mode by board member. Looking at the overall mean, which was a 2.2, for each descriptor of competency 1, the superintendent is rated as competent, and the board could write specific goals or objectives to help the superintendent move from competent to highly competent. And because there is a discrepancy, scroll up just a little bit, very good. Because there is a discrepancy between board member A, who evaluated the superintendent for this competency as a 3, whereas board member E evaluated the superintendent in this fictitious example as a 1.33, which would be not competent, or competent with reservations, I apologize, competent with reservations, that it would be beneficial for board member A and board member E to write the commentary together and propose specific goals or targets for the board to consider for the superintendent. So with the binary system, it is a yes, no. With an analytic rubric system, there's an opportunity to score and then look at the scoring. So in order to be very explicit and intentional, I would stand for a motion about the method of scoring
Madam
that the board
President,
would prefer. Yes, Mrs. Simoia.
would you like a motion first, or would you want discussion about this rubric?
I have to, well, we could, let's do questions. Just feel free
Okay.
to ask me questions and then we could go into
So
discussion.
more of a statement, because I noticed, and I thank you for working on this rubric for my attention, or me specifically. I noticed that the rubric included the specific identifiable. As you scroll back, you'll see, keep coming on down, that each one of those 1A, 1B, 1C, foresight, examining issues, taking initiatives, are all the principal statements in question number 1 of the competencies that we did. So are you looking at the opportunity of doing a 3-point in for each one of those, or where there's only, for instance, question 3, basically, principal administrator uses effective people skills to communicate?
That is correct.
So-
It would be specific to each one of these
So this
competencies.
one, that might just have 1.
That's
because
correct.
It's only asking.
That's
Okay,
correct.
great. Because, yeah.
But item 2, for instance,
Mhm.
the administrator embraces and encourages
And
the acceptance of diversity. So we would definitely say embraces
and diversity and
diversity and
Encourages
encourages the
diversity.
acceptance of diversity.
And then the one other thing that I noticed, we have 5 potential board members, A through E, but is there an opportunity to put a column so that our acting superintendent can also score herself using this rubric as well?
We absolutely could include that as an option. I would think that we would want to do that as a separate motion.
Right.
But yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you. You've
We
answered
could-
my question.
Is there any other questions just for me to for clarification before we move to a motion?
So at what point will we have a complete instrument?
I would be willing to commit the time to write some proposed language for you and get it to you over the weekend.
And then we would have to vote on that instrument.
We probably should come back and vote on that instrument, but if you like this style,
Would we have to? Not necessarily.
then we could do it, voting on the descriptors, in a different meeting.
We've already said that we're using we already voted and approved the competencies.
Correct.
So it's just a matter of breaking those competencies down into a rubric, such 1A, 1B, 1C. They don't include anything that is not already in the
That's correct.
competencies that we
That's
approved.
correct.
So would we necessarily need to vote on it, or is this something that does not need to be shared?
In terms of the rubric language?
Yeah. And that might be a question for Mr. Spotts from an HR perspective as well. Mhm. For the superintendent or acting superintendent. Okay.
I know in the work session, we talked about, the two options for scoring and expressed our pros and our cons for both. But we do have to pick one because time is of the essence to stay in compliance. So,
Well, excuse me, with that being said, we go off these competencies and we just add this scale aside it, can't we just do that and that would complete that part?
yes, it could be, absolutely.
I mean, there would be no language added, no language changed. Here's the language. Here's our opinion, here's our voted number.
So I
With the
think,
comment section.
I think that there would have to be part of that motion to break it down into to break each competency down into its sub competencies, I guess.
Because, yeah, the criteria.
The criteria.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we have to use competencies as they're written. I would say, because we just voted that we were gonna be very competent.
So
If
how
we
would we
were to-
score it?
If we were to go ahead and use these competencies, using the scale of highly competent, competent,
Competent with reservation.
confident with reservations, rather than having you work all weekend
Mhm.
and just allowing for a comment under each one, so each board
Possibility
member
too.
could go ahead and add their comment
Possibility
underneath
too.
where as to why I scored, why you scored highly competent or competent at this, where you hit these two, but you didn't hit this one, rather than.
Absolutely, absolutely. We had talked in our work session about the binary and or because remember you provided us with an example of a rubric, so to
Right.
speak. So what I did is apply that thought here. But absolutely, we could just say for competency one,
Mhm.
that we would rate on a highly competent, competent with reservations or not competent, and then provide your evidence or your justification, and we can combine those together as a board. Absolutely. Absolutely, we could do that.
That makes that a lot
Yeah.
easier and does not get into any kind of a legal concerns.
Sure.
Mhm. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I will stand for a motion.
Dr. Osowski, I move that we use the evaluation criteria of highly competent, competent with reservations and not competent for our evaluation criteria for the superintendent.
Is there a second?
Madam President, I'd like to amend that Mr. Talley's motion by adding the scoring of 3 points for highly competent, 2 points for competent, 1 point for competent with reservations, and no scoring points for not competent, so that we can get to a number.
Thank you. I'll withdraw my motion and second yours.
Okay,
I just amended yours, that's all.
Yeah, she just amended.
Further amended it.
sure.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Get out. You have the total right motion?
Seconding.
Let's clean this up. Mr. Tally, are you willing to amend your motion or would you like to withdraw your motion?
Whatever is easier for
Ms.
Mrs. Wolf.
At this hour.
Either way, the end result's gonna be the same, just whatever is easiest for Mrs. Wolf. I think she's already typing that I withdrew mine and Ms. Simoia. I will,
Yeah.
I will amend my motion. My amended motion is that we will use the scoring criteria, highly competent with 3 points, competent with 2 points, competent with reservations, 1 point, and not competent, 0 points as our evaluation criteria.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Is there any discussion?
There's, Karen needs a minute to finish
Sure.
typing or something.
Hands up.
So.
Yes, to include the narrative. Include the narrative.
I will further amend it to add the narrative
For each competency?
for each competency.
And now I second that motion. We got it now.
Do we have that?
Yeah.
Great. Is there any discussion?
Let's go.
To stand for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mrs. Simoia?
Yes.
Mr. Tally?
Yes.
And I vote yes, motion passes 5-0. Furthermore, because we need to make this as explicit as possible, would be the timeline for Mrs. Chavis's evaluation.
Dr. Rosowski, before we do that, can we take a 5-minute?
We can sure take a 5-minute break. This board will take a break at 8:48 PM. Thank you for doing that. I need water. Okay, Mrs. Wolf, are you ready?
Absolutely.
Did I hear snarky, Mrs. Wolf?
No. Never.
You ready? No.
Okay, now we're about the timeline. There is a timeline established in the district, and I think Mrs. Chavez had shared it with us that all evaluations should be completed by the 1st of March. Is that correct?
So there's a few different deadlines, and Mr. Size, correct me if I'm wrong, the first deadline is quickly approaching. That's on February 4th, and that is for administrators in our district. Certified employees, I believe, is the Friday before spring break. Off the top of my head, I think it's the 14th, maybe, March 14th. And then the final timeline is for classified, and that would be the Friday after spring break.
We're not
So
gonna
the
hit February
28th.
4th. We're not gonna hit that. We're gonna be late. Apologies, Mr. Size. The board's gonna be late. I'll write a note. See what that gets me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so why are we here? Oh, yeah. What to think that right now? Okay, so from the board retreat and also from the work session, we talked about this concern of completing Mrs. Chavez's annual evaluation as close to the target completion date for the district. So if we don't hit the February 4th, we might be able to come close and hit like the middle of February. So something that we could consider now that we have the instrument and we have the method for scoring is some deadlines. So I wanted to just kind of throw some things out there, and this is of course just me talking, and this would be discussion before we go to, or just thoughts before we go to a motion, and then other discussion specific to that motion, is that each board member could complete Form C with their scoring and their evidence or commentary by Sunday evening, February 2nd. So homework on the weekends. I know.
No football, it's good.
No football.
That's, yeah.
Is there no football that weekend? That's important to note because I was worried about that. Then, so you could send it to, you could send it to me, you could send it to anybody that we want to designate for just to put all of the scores together. So everybody on the board can see those scores and comments. Then
On that suggestion, could we not just get the form set out and then just bring it completed when we get?
Sure
on the
could.
13th,
We could do that.
instead of Avoid sending out anything and.
Yep.
Oh, for IPRA, that's a good point. That's a great one.
I'd rather not do that.
Yep.
Oh, come on now. Let's make it fun. We could then schedule a closed executive session for Thursday evening, February 13th, to discuss each of our scores, comments, and overall rating by competency. And we would have to designate a spot. We know that, Mrs. Wolf, you're already giving us the look. We know that we would have to be very specific.
But on that meeting, that would be we'd have to go into executive to do this.
That's correct.
It's a personnel matter, so yes.
Yes, it would be personnel, so it would be closed, so it would be a special meeting going into closed executive session. And we could do that on the Thursday that we are at our training, so that we're not skipping any time here.
The only thing we gotta be clear on that is where we're gonna have it because of cost. And we're gonna be shy of one board member probably.
Well, cost, Mrs. Simoia may have a solution for us.
We have a couple of different options. Number one, the hotel where we will be staying is one of my clients, so I could possibly ask if they'd be willing to let me have one of the conference rooms in which, and then again, Mr. Talley will have to be participating via call-in at that time, so we will have to have opportunities for that. If that is not available to us or they want to charge for this, we do not want any additional cost to the district. So another thing that I do have available to me is the Santa Fe Medical Center Presbyterian Healthcare Services does have a
couple of conference rooms that does have audio AV that we could actually bring in Mr. Talley to have that conversation. I could check either one of those rooms if we would like to do it for an executive session while we're up in Santa Fe anyways, so.
Cause you gotta remember, you gotta announce at the executive meeting, so.
Yeah,
So
it would have
And
to
the
be
location.
announced. And probably the Santa Fe Medical Center would be my suggested one, only because it does have a public conference room, but it would be for a closed executive session.
Mr. Vickers, I heard something over there.
So why not do it either on the 4th or the 11th?
Do you know what? I was just looking at my other little chart and thinking, why couldn't we do that on the fourth?
We can give you homework. You
Yeah.
can do the scoring averaging
Look at Mr.
between
Baker.
Sunday and Tuesday.
Yes, between Sunday and Tuesday, there are,
Sunday, you don't have to score. We bring our paperwork, going to get, take care of it.
We bring our paperwork and
bring it
discuss the
here.
scoring at
I
that time.
understand.
So let's. Why drag it out?
oh, because we wanna make this as complicated as possible.
Everyone good on the fourth?
So we could do
We could
that.
do that.
We could do a special meeting that we'd have to go into closed executive on February 4th. Right after a work session.
Okay.
We're here for a work session on the fourth.
Okay, so the 4th, okay.
Hold on a second. We haven't made a motion yet.
No,
I
we're not
I'm
motioning,
just checking.
just bantering ideas.
Do we have a work session? I don't have it on my calendar that we have.
We don't, but I believe that I will be,
We do now.
I'll be calling for one because we have another pressing issue. So I'll be calling for a
Right.
work session and then a special meeting.
With a closed executive session. And that way we don't have to
And we can do
bring
two birds with
Missy,
two stings.
Ms. Chavez up to Santa Fe to present hers during that closed.
Well, and we wouldn't have
executive
to worry about a room. Are you in town? So you're not travel and you could, oh, that would be awesome. Okay.
session. Right, we didn't make any decisions. We missed-
So we're just kind of
So-
bantering ideas because we don't have a motion yet, so we're brainstorming here. Then we could, if that's, yes? Yes, did you have a question? Oh, I thought it sounded like a question. Okay, so we could score on Tuesday, February 4th and discuss it then. And then we either could have Mrs. Chavez come in with us during the closed executive session to discuss the results, or we could designate some representatives of the board to meet with Mrs. Chavez.
No, I think
We could do it, all of us.
all
I think that was an issue last time.
Okay,
And I think it'd be better if we're all there present with an overall scoring.
so those are definitely some things to consider. So our final part for this, because we would not need to be thinking about representatives if that's how the motion goes.
Right.
Okay, so I will stand for a motion for the timeline for the evaluation. I will attempt making this motion. I move that the timeline for the acting superintendent's evaluation be as follows. Each individual board member completes their individual evaluation by Sunday evening, or actually before Tuesday,
Yeah.
February 4th, 2025. And the board would have a special meeting on Tuesday, February 4th, 2025, where we would go into closed executive session to finalize the board's overall evaluation of Mrs. Chavez and ask Mrs. Chavez to join the board to review the overall evaluation. So her evaluation could be completed by the night of February 4th, 2025.
It's close to the first.
Yes, Mrs. Wolf.
So you're saying the special?
I think we would.
I think we
Another
ought to
topic for the special, we have another topic for the special meeting that I want to bring up with the members, so the closed executive session will be
Specific to the event.
specific to the evaluation of Mrs. Chavez in the acting superintendency. So.
I'll second your motion.
No.
No.
Let me ask this vote too. We don't have to disclose everything that we did, but I thought when we were done and came out, we
know
have
what?
to vote
No, I
to
think
accept
all
the.
we come out is we what we did in the closed session, which was had the evaluation of Ms. Chavez, and that's it.
Look at
Nothing
that.
more, because it's personnel act. Nothing else has to be disclosed to fund my.
We're gonna ask legal, we're gonna get
Yeah,
counsel.
but I'm pretty sure I'm right.
You're right.
I'm pretty sure, right?
Okay. You let him have a knife at the Matanza? It's to wield a knife when he's pretty sure.
He's definitely right if he's got the knife.
Okay,
So
we will get clarification on
Yes,
whether or not we
that's
have to
fine.
come out. But that's the purpose of the closed executive session.
Yes.
So my motion, to recap, is that the board will have completed their individual evaluation of Mrs. Chavez in the acting superintendency role by Tuesday, February 4th. And the board will go into, we'll have a special meeting on February 4th, or in the evaluation will be reviewed, completed, and then discussed with Mrs. Chavez in a special meeting, specifically a closed executive session on February 4th, 2025. And you've seconded that motion. Is there any other discussion?
I seconded it.
Yes, Mr. Bennett did.
And Mr. Talley.
At Mr. Somebody has a knife over here. I'm a little Twitter pated. Okay. I'm gonna call for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mrs. Simoia,
Yes.
Mr. Talley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much for getting through, being very explicit with that.
So
Let
that
us-
being said,
So that being said,
we've already got the competencies and we've basically got the scoring, so we
That
can
is
start
correct.
our homework now.
we can. There we go. And I can send you out just a form.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll do that tomorrow.
Like I said, just have the paper form here when we see it.
Mrs. Wolf, I'll send the form to Mrs. Wolf and she'll send it out. She'll probably use the Dropbox. Is that correct?
I believe that.
Thank you. Thank you for validating me. I appreciate that. Okay. New business. So we have on our work sessions quite a list. And I want to review that. So we're on Q, new business, board member requests for topics for upcoming board work sessions and or board meetings. So from our last one, we had teacher and administrator accountability, AI policies and plagiarism, reviewing the functions of SROs, UNMBC liaison opportunities, those are being specifically student opportunities, safety on campus, UNMBC teacher development, addressing inclusion of SPED topics and to include special ed equipment, feasibility study on additional languages. So thinking about Apex learning, is that correct? How we could start developing, expanding the fine arts, discussing instructional coaches and the need for them, their roles, et cetera. So again, more in depth. Online streaming, remote contribution to public comment. This was specific, a concern Mr. Talley had from one of his training sessions from our most recent, that we may not be in compliance. So we may need some better discussion on that one. Then tonight, we also added Title IX and boosters being in compliance with Title IX. And Mr. Vickers has a carryover topic, which might need to take some precedence for our next work session after our other two topics. And that is a review of our athletics department to make sure we are in full compliance with Title IX. Because we haven't done that yet.
Right, and I requested that, and I understand now we've shifted, we've had a change of leadership in that department, in that role, so.
But that's still important because it's Title IX, and so that might need to be a priority. So now that I've listed all of the topics we have so far, are there any other topics for work sessions that board members would like us to start thinking about, and then we need to prioritize?
I think Mr. Talley's comments today about the effective use of remote learning. Effective curriculum or processes in remote learning. I think we have a full agenda.
Sounds like
Those things you just try to plan.
Oh, true. No, that's just our topic. Prioritizing
Somebody has to pull it down 3 or 4.
for each work session. Yes. What I wanted to do was maybe put out something for the next 5 months, and we prioritize which ones would be first. Versus, you know, because we have February coming up, then we have March, and then we have April and May. So to get these topics, we might get through by May.
Right. The Title IX, that might want to wait a little bit because after this session's done. you know,
Well, the Title IX
Things coming out.
compliance issues, I don't think those will change much. It's a matter of proper percentages of, you know, girls in sports versus boys.
And how
based-
monies are
based
spent.
on attendance at the school and those kind of things. There's specific criteria. I don't think those kind of things will change at the federal level, probably. It goes back to the basics of Title IX.
Right. Right. Well, the other thing, I do know that we have many community members that have the perception that we have inequitability between the Jaguar Nation and the Tiger Nation in terms of equipment, supplies, and facilities. So we could definitely answer that and resolve it if we did have a Title IX review, a comprehensive one. But that needs to be a work session where we talk about what we would want to see in it.
Right.
But I do think it needs to be elevated in terms of a priority
Right.
now that we've named somebody. But I'll list all of these, and then maybe we need to prioritize them as a board, because that's a lot that we want to do by May, including the whole board policy manual. Is there anything else? No pressure. Is there anything else?
Let's.
I'm gonna add one. It's gonna be lots of fun. We begin the process of strategic planning. We are one of 80, there's like 10 districts out of 89 that do not have a strategic plan. We are one. So I will be adding strategic planning and the process to go through that. Okay. We are now to item R, the announcement of meetings. I would like to add a work session and then special meeting for February 4th. The work session to begin. Mr. Talley, what is a good time? Mr. Talley and Mrs. Simoia, what is a good time for you considering your work schedule? 4?
Yeah, for
4.
4? So we would start the work session at 4, the special meeting at 6.
Of the closed executive session.
And that the special meeting will include a closed executive session.
Thank you.
So the work session will include some of the topics you just mentioned.
Yes.
So
Yep. one of those topics will be the superintendent search and selection criteria. That will be in our work session.
Okay.
And then that will be in the special meeting. We'll go through, I envision going through a process like we did tonight with the evaluation, where we break it into its component parts and we step it out and discuss it publicly, so we're in full compliance with the law. We don't want a Las Cruces incident here. So the special meeting will be specific to the superintendent search and selection, and then there will be a closed executive session for personnel. And that will be specific to the annual evaluation for the acting superintendent. Then on February 11th, 2025 will be the Finance Committee meeting in the Central Office Conference Room at 3:00 p.m. On February 13th through the 15th, 2025, the New Mexico School Board Association conferences, which are held at the El Dorado Hotel, 309 West San Francisco Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico. A quorum of board members will be in attendance. This is board training purposes only. These trainings are required by state statute and no action will be taken. And on February 18th, 2025, will be a regular board meeting, which will be held in the central office boardroom at 6:00 p.m. Have I missed any meetings for the month of February that are on anybody's head?
No, but Madam President, I do believe for the record, you do have to read the announcement of meetings as stated in the Open Meetings Act before we close the meeting.
So read it.
Yeah, you have to read the,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
So I didn't just do that by reading it?
no, you have to go through why.
Oh, the whys?
So basically, yeah, I know. Sorry. Yep.
Okay, this part, okay. This brings us to the announcement of meetings as allowed by the Open Meetings Act and the District Open Meetings Resolution. On occasion, a quorum of the board members attend the same function, including school and district celebrations and ceremonies, as well as sports, functions, conferences, workshops, trainings, and community events. Board members will refrain from discussing and or acting on Los Lunas Schools Board of Education issues in those settings. In addition, only official meetings are published, and if other meetings are scheduled, they will be announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. With that being said, I would like to announce the following work session and a special meeting with a closed executive session on February 4th, the work session beginning at 4:00 p.m., the special meeting beginning at 6:00 p.m. February 11th.
That's 11th.
2025 is the Finance Committee meeting in the Central Office Conference Room at 3:00 p.m. February 13th through 15th, 2025, the New Mexico School Boards Association Conference at the El Dorado Hotel, 309 West San Francisco Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico. A quorum is in attendance. Board training purposes only and no actions will be taken. February 18th, the regular board meeting, which will be held in the Central Office Boardroom at 6:00 p.m.
I have one more comment.
Yes, please.
Ms. Tracy, is there going to be an audit committee meeting in February? Do you anticipate that we'll have the completed audit by then? So can we add the audit committee on the 11th?
At 4:00.
Yeah, 4:00. And if we don't have it completed yet, we can cancel that meeting, but just put it in there. We should have an audit by then. Okay.
Good catch.
So I will restate on February 11th, Finance Committee meeting in the Central Office Conference Room at 3:00 p.m. and an Audit Committee meeting also in the Central Office Conference Room at 4:00 p.m. Thank you for asking that question. We're on to item S, adjournment. With that being said, this leads us to the adjournment of the meeting. I would stand for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Talley.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Talley has moved and Mr. Bennett has seconded to adjourn the meeting. I will call for the vote. Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Talley.
Yes.
Mrs. Simoia?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Thank you
Thank you,
very
everyone.
much. Passed. The meeting is adjourned at 9:22 PM.
Congratulations to David Gardner, being the only one that doesn't have to be here, but stayed.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for staying.